Chapter 1926. Lu Xiaoyi was rarely so serious. Secondly, we need to inform the upper echelons of the exterior realm. The danger of the exterior realm lies in a group of people who don't know the truth. Even if we have official robes, everyone knows that the law can't punish the majority. This official robe can punish the exterior heavenly half of mortals who maliciously attack us. But what if all the exterior heavenly cultivators participate in this? Who will be punished? In the end, it's just a formality, and the unlucky ones will be us. In the end, history will treat us as the invaders of the exterior realm. This is unlikely because the immortals behind the two realms don't want to see this, but we have to be careful, because our lives are ours, not theirs. The interior realm geniuses nodded. Lu Xiaoyi's words really hit the nail on the head. This is what a real leader should do. The four of us, the marching monk, and Ma Bailu will not participate in the first stage of the operation for the time being. Instead, we will visit the main cultivation forces of the exterior realm. We will strive to get their acquiescence and understanding. Even if they can't help us, they won't secretly hinder us. This way, at least in the mainstream of the exterior realm, we will become a trend that everyone wants to fight against. This will also be beneficial to our most important goal of digging up the inside story. Looking around at the eager geniuses, a detailed and careful plan always made people feel at ease. This was not an army of mortals. They couldn't just give orders without explanation. This was the biggest difference between cultivators and mortals. Only when everyone was clear about their specific mission in this operation and had a sufficient understanding of the general strategy could they maximize their subjective initiative. We have another biggest advantage, which is that we can communicate with each other through the Jade Booklet. This is something that the exterior realm cultivators don't have the right to use. You have to make full use of it. No matter what you do right, what you do wrong, what you have to do, what you need to improve, say it. Don't be like a taciturn gourd, jumping into a trap one by one like idiots. Tens of thousands against tens of thousands. No matter what we do wrong, it's not embarrassing. My personal attitude towards this Heaven's Eyes mission is that I don't care. Someone in the upper echelons put laxatives in their pants and cause an exterior master to shit his pants. What does it have to do with us, the cleaners? Even if things get out of hand in the end, we will be the least responsible. But if we lose a lot of people in this mission, we will be the laughing stock in the end. I didn't wipe properly and ended up smearing my crotch. The freaks laughed loudly. This was also the truth. In fact, what they were most afraid of was that the leader was a lackey of the higher-ups, who did not take their lives seriously for the sake of personal prestige. But now, it seemed that choosing Lu Xiaojun as the leader was a good choice. He was a trustworthy leader. Lu Xiaoyi waved his hand and said, "If you have no other questions, you may go your separate ways. Later on, we will mark some gathering points on a Jade Book so that everyone can gather together. I'll say the same thing again. The first stage is to use speed as the core and quickly filter out the candidates. You can give up on the rest. I hope you can catch some big fish. Even if you catch some, don't disturb them. Just treat it as an ordinary matter. Leave them with the hope of escaping this calamity. Then, after the first stage is over, we will look back." Everyone roared and left. With a clear goal and a reliable way of doing things, everything was actually not that difficult. Soon, only the four enforcers and the marching monk by Lu were left. Their next task was not easy. I don't need to teach you how to deal with these local tyrants. Everyone has their own ways. Fish look for fish, shrimp look for shrimp, and turtles look for turtles. The power of Buddhism is the hands-free and the marching monks, right? I don't ask you to do the best, but there can't be any problems with the mainstream. Our mission this time is not a mission that can be done secretly. If we don't leak it in advance, as long as we take action, we will be exposed without a doubt. So, there's nothing to hide. It's not like we are thieves. Let's do something above board. Let's put a big hat on them first. Lu Xiaoyi paused. My opinion is that we only dig for clues for those who buy in, and don't put in the Jade Book. Don't make it public, and promise to destroy all the records afterwards. Let's spread this through the mainstream big shots. Consider it our sincerity. The marching monk sighed. His confidence was getting lower and lower. If the opponent was only powerful and cruel, he would not care. But for an opponent like Lu Xiaoyi, the scariest thing about him was not his powerful strength, but his other aspects. This was what really made him despair. Originally, he thought that a swordsman was just a person with hard hands and a short brain. But now, it seemed that this was not the case at all. He had only appeared a few times in the interior realm. With just one interior Dharma assembly and one confrontation between the interior and exterior realms, he had won over the hearts of most of the Taoist monsters. Many of the Buddhist monsters even praised him. The marching monk was too embarrassed to speak ill of him, because the more he spoke, the more inferior he would appear. This person was very good at borrowing power. He could make thunder appear in silence. Every inconspicuous little thing could allow him to achieve a different effect. Even the marching monk had to admit defeat to this ability to control people's hearts. It was not that he did not try to expand his influence in the interior realm, but the results were minimal. At most, he could only strengthen his position in the Buddhist forces. But he realized that even in the Buddhist forces, he could not stop this person's subtle influence. Was it his innate charisma? He could not tell that this person who was full of vulgarities was powerful strength. The swordsman was very strong, but none of the demigods here would follow him just because he was strong. What was the reason? He was still observing, but there was one thing he was very clear about. This swordsman was definitely secretly digging a hole for him, so he could not act rashly in the exterior realm. If he showed that he put his personal grudges above the interests of the interior realm, he would be finished. This guy had been waiting for this day. He was very sure. Don't worry, Lu Jun. The tradition of Buddhism is very strong, and with the promise of not making things worse, we are confident. Lu Xiaoyi nodded and turned to the other three. The tradition of Taoism is weak, and no one is willing to submit to another. So the task for the four of us is not easy. How about this? Leave the sword vein to me, and the rest of you go. The three of them shook their heads like a rattle drum. You wish. There are only a few people with the sword vein. What's the point? No, the body vein is also yours, and forget it. You could take the side path. Chapter 1927. Lu Xiaoyi acted alone. His primary target was naturally the sword vein. Then, with the help of the sword vein, he would start to lobby those unorthodox sections. The biggest benefit of the Jade booklet being open to them was that the map was open. This was a necessity for carrying out missions. Otherwise, if dozens of people were to charge into the exterior realm in a daze, they wouldn't even be able to familiarize themselves with the environment for at least a few decades. Therefore, for the exterior realm, which was the territory of the Orthodox Dharma lineage, and which was the position of the unorthodox sects, the difference between the four symbols heaven and the division between Buddhism and Taoism all had their own rules. These are things that had gradually formed over millions of years. In the unspeakable lands of the exterior realm, the orthodox Taoism adopted the strategy of grouping together. This was mainly to make it easier for them to come and go during the Dharma assembly, so that they wouldn't have to waste precious time on running around. Of course, there were always those who were unique and stood out from the masses. The unorthodox sects also tended to group together, but it wasn't as obvious as the orthodox Taoism. They were clearly scattered, with countless unorthodox sects mixed together, making it very messy. Among them, the ones who were the closest to each other were the cultivators from the same sect. However, the difficulty of the Blight realm was so high that it wasn't easy for each sect to produce one. The few Blight realm cultivators that could gather together were all powerful sects in their respective universes. Overall, they were very few. The Xianyuan sword sect was considered to be very powerful among these unorthodox sections. They currently had a total of 4 exterior realm cultivators, including Lu Xiaoyi. According to the time they entered, they were Tingxi, Chu Bai, Zhou Xing, and Lu Xiaoyi. Of course, Lu Xiaoyi didn't count as he only entered occasionally. Near the few swordsmen in Xianyuan, there were quite a number of weakening sword vein cultivators. Among them, there were a few powerful sword vein cultivators that were similar to Xianyuan. Therefore, this area was nicknamed as the Cloud of the Sword Vein. There were around 100 to 200 swordsman cultivators gathered together. Not far from them, there was a place that was even larger than the sword vein cultivators' gathering point. However, there were a lot more people here than the swordsman cultivators. There were at least 1,000 of them, and there were still a lot of them floating outside. The sword vein was filled with the aura of the sword. It was either frenzied or restrained, sharp or reserved, and the Tao realm was ever-changing. Its cultivation was incomparably deep, and it was filled with killing intent as if it wanted to devour its target. These were not Xuanyuan's sword Tao. The core essence of Xuanyuan's sword Tao was one word: wariness. On the surface, it was erratic and unpredictable, as if it wanted to leave but stayed. However, in this wandering, there was a hidden killing intent. Xianyuan was not the only sword vein here. Lu Xiaoyi had roamed the universe for 2,000 years. He had seen some sword vein, such as the Zhou Xian sword vein, the Heaven's Choice sword vein, the Tiger Hill sword vein, and even the Shijiao sword vein. To be honest, he was very disappointed. It was either mediocre or declining. Every swordsman had a sword heart that was searching for its roots. What they hoped to encounter the most during their travels in the void was a sword vein inheritance that would make their eyes light up. Unfortunately, he probably did not have the chance in the Eastern Elephant Sky. It was not only the places he had been to, but also the places he had met so many friends of the Eastern Sky. It seemed that none of them had mentioned a sword vein orthodoxy in the universe that could be mentioned in the same breath as Xianyuan. This was probably not good news for a swordsman. He had no way of roaming the entire universe. The only place he could hope to meet his peers was the interior and exterior scenery skies. There was no interior scenery skies, so his only hope now was the exterior scenery skies. There were hundreds of swordsmen's auras in the Blight realm here. Of course, this also meant that there was a corresponding powerful sword vein orthodoxy in the origin world. Without hesitation, he charged into the sword vein clouds. In the blink of an eye, a sword light flew out diagonally. This was the path of an external sword, but it was executed with great precision. Lu Xiaoyi did not hold back either. With a sweep of his flying sword, the two sword lights circled in the air and clashed hundreds of times. The silver vase broke and water splashed, and the cavalry clashed with their swords and spears. The instantaneous changes in the Tao realm, the changes in strength, the changes in gathering and dispersing, the changes in rhythm. In the short span of a few breaths and hundreds of swords, the two swordsmen's profound swordsmanship and keen observation were fully displayed. Cheers came from the sword vein clouds all around. No one came out. This was the way swordsmen greeted others. If it had been someone from another orthodoxy, they would have received an even fiercer challenge from the swordsman. This was not a place where strangers could enter as they pleased. However, Lu Xiaoyi's move was his pass. He was one of them. Therefore, he could go anywhere he wanted. It was that simple. However, to other orthodoxies, this was something that could not be replicated. Among the rows of purple spirit clouds, there was a spirit cloud with an aura that he was very familiar with. It was also his target. With a flash of his body, he charged into it, causing sighs to be heard from the spirit clouds around him. Such a good young man, yet he was the seed of another sword vein. What a pity! As soon as Lu Xiaoyi charged into the spirit cloud, he immediately sensed three powerful auras in the depths of the cloud. In the next moment, three Taoists with different appearances appeared in front of him. One was a thin old man with his hands behind his back. One was a burly man with a sword on his back. And the last one was a pretty boy with a sword in his hand. Lu Xiaoyi bowed. I am Lu Xiaoyi, the third, sixth, and fifth generation disciple of Xianyuan. Greetings to the three elders. The old man was Ting Xie, a mighty fourth decay cultivator with an internal sword. He looked at him carefully. Little E, are you here to cause trouble? The burly man was Chu Bai, an external sword cultivator. He glared at him. Little E, I heard that you made us lose our external swords. The last young man was Zhou Xing. He was all smiles. It's fine if it's gone. It's good that I don't have to go to the lower realm anymore. My disciples and grand disciples are all gone. It's a good time to relax. This was Lu Xiaoyi's first impression of the current Xianyuan sword sect's ancestors. Of course, he could also be considered half an ancestor now. The only thing he lacked was the accumulation of time. In Xuanyuan's history, the ancestors were roughly divided into 3 levels. The first level was Emperor Xianyuan and 13th ancestor Li Wuya. Both of them had the experience of becoming immortals. Emperor Xianyuan founded Xianyuan, while ancestor Li Wuya merged with the Khanate Great Tao and became a golden immortal of the Tao immortal realm. Later on, he even raised the curtain of the change of the era. The second level was 4th ancestor Heng Zhou and 6th ancestor Wei Ji. Not only did they make great contributions when Xianyuan sword sect was first established, but they were also the pillars of Xuanyuan's development. They also left behind 2 branches of swordsmanship for Xianyuan sword sect, the graceful sword and the killing sword. Among these 4 people, other than 4th ancestor Jiang Hengzhou, who had died according to the sect's ancient records, Wei Ji was actually still alive and well. Lu Xiaoyi even saw him once in the interior realm. However, this had nothing to do with the level of cultivation. It was purely due to the abnormal lifespan of the strange beast. There were still 2 people of the first level left. In fact, their life and death were still unclear even now. Everyone agreed that Emperor Xianyuan should still be alive and well. However, ever since he became an immortal, there were no signs of him at all. Previously, Ancestor Li Wuya's mainstream view was that he went with the morals and collapsed along with Tao. However, all kinds of conspiracy theories were rampant now. It was as if he had climbed out of his coffin and made a comeback. Chapter 1928. There were many patriarchs at the 3rd level, such as the Xianyuan patriarchs of a certain period, or those who were lucky enough to reach a higher level of yang spirit and went to the exterior and exterior scenery heaven. There were more of them, such as the ones in front of him, the ones in the interior scenery heaven, and the deceased 3 Qins, Wu Shixing, Hu Xuedao, and the others. They could also be called patriarchs, but they were a little less common. There were a lot of patriarchs, but compared to the 3 pure ones, there were fewer. This was a unique phenomenon in the cultivation world. Tinxi asked, "Little E, did you come to the exterior scenery heaven to investigate the case?" Lu Xiaoyi nodded helplessly. Indeed, good news never left the house, but bad news spread far and wide. Senior brothers, has the news spread to such an extent? Zhou Xing smiled. Of course. With the protective nature of the exterior scenery immortal monarch, how could he really let you do it in private? If you reveal secrets that shouldn't be revealed, everyone's face will be lost. Of course, you don't have to worry too much. The news has just been released, and it will take some time for it to spread by word of mouth. Moreover, those who know now are some powerful orthodoxies, not to mention Orthodox Taoism and Buddhism. Among the heterodox orthodoxies, only a few influential orthodoxies know about it, such as our sword vein and the body vein next to it. If you are fast enough, it won't be a problem to catch some rotten fish and shrimps. I just don't know if you can report to your superiors in this way. Lu Xiaoyi sighed inwardly. As expected. Thus, he told them the purpose of his visit, focusing on the forgiveness of those who privately bought the heart plate in the Great Way, to ensure that their secrets would not be leaked. He would only look for the root cause and not harm the branches and branches. Tinxi was very curious. How can you guarantee that you will do what you say? You are just a group of half-immortals, not even real half-immortals. If the owner behind the Jade Book wants to use it to blackmail the exterior cultivators, you are in the exterior scenery heaven and the information is in the Jade Book. What right do you have to make the decision? Lu Xiaoyi said softly, Abbot Heavens, I gave me the position of the chief enforcer. This is not purely in name, but as a special task of the Immortal Court, a one-time position granted by the Immortal Court. In other words, I have the right to monopolize it this time. In addition, when we entered, the interior immortal monarch also gave us some pointers on how to avoid the exterior immortal monarch. Therefore, I can do it. Tinksy stared at him for a long time before saying, "Don't tell others what you just said. Others would be jealous of him, especially the first one." Lu Xiaoyi nodded. Understood. Only the 3 senior brothers could do it. The enforcer sent me a private message after confirming the acquired eye. This is the only real right I have as the first seat. From the beginning to the end, Lu Xiaoyi did not ask his 3 senior brothers if they had also secretly looked at it after buying it. As a swordsman, if he didn't have this kind of temperament, he would be a half-deity in vain. Not to mention the 3 of them. Even the masters on the dome would not be willing to accept the 2 heart plates that he had brought back. Essence might be a little remote, but the great Tao of primal chaos was still relatively popular in Xianyuan, and the primal chaos heaven heart sword was an outstanding representative of it. But even so, those who cultivated the primal chaos were disdainful of it, and their determination could be seen. Tinksy nodded. I understand what you mean. I can pass on your message in the sword vein cloud and restrict their actions. This is where the sword Tao half-deities gather. I could say very responsibly that there might be a few sword Tao half-deities who have secretly bought the heart plates, but most people will definitely be indifferent to it. If there really are such people, I will let them go directly to you when I pass on the message, skipping our link. How many of them there are will depend on your luck. Lu Xiaoyi bowed again. Thank you, senior brother. Little E is blind here, and there are many grudges between the inner and outer scenic heavens. It's hard to say much when we're not close enough. It's better for the few of you to come forward. Chubai interrupted from aside. He was the 3rd decay external sword, and was considered an expert in the outer scenic heavens. He was good at making friends, especially in the heterodox Tao. There are only about 100 people in the sword vein, so it's easy to say, if I'm not wrong, you'll find other heterodox Tao to pass on your message, right? I can't guarantee anything else, but I have a good relationship with the people in the body vein. I'll bring you over later. Those big musclemen won't dare to not give face. Also, your senior brother Zhou Xing should be biased towards the miscellaneous sections. His connections are wider than mine, so he won't let you go alone and get kicked out. Lu Xiaoyi was overjoyed. These few senior brothers were really too helpful. Family was different. Even if it was the first time they met, they helped him without holding back. However, he didn't know that his actions were actually magnified in the eyes of these old monsters. How could they not help a person who could destroy the Tao world and possibly lead Xianyuan to glory? The mortal world valued connections, but the cultivation world valued them even more. We've never met each other before, so why should I listen to your bullsh *T? Without acquaintances, you wouldn't even be able to find someone to talk to. You could even be ignored. You couldn't be rough. Wear official clothes. That was the stupidest way. You could wear it when you were catching a thief, but you definitely couldn't wear it when you were trying to make friends. Wearing it would only ruin things. For people outside the organization like them, they despise those in the organization the most. It was just like the attitude of the heroes in the mortal world towards the 6 fan school. Tinksy's face darkened. Xiaoyi, as your senior brothers, will support you fully. But now that you're in charge of Xianyuan, you have to tell us the truth. You can't hide it. Lu Xiaoyi could roughly guess what they were going to ask, so he straightened his attitude. Please speak. Tinksy lowered her voice. When the era changes, do you want our sword vein to take the lead? Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. That's not realistic, and the sword vein isn't suitable to lead the cultivation world. Living a tiring life isn't a blessing for Xianyuan. We can't solve the problem of having too many inheritances. People should be ambitious, but not delusional. Xiaoyi knows the difference. The 3 old swordsmen heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this little guy still knew what his surname was. He could still eat a few bowls of rice. They watched the changes in the mortal world from the exterior heaven with trepidation. They could feel the hidden ambition in this little guy's every move. Tinksy asked again. Xiaoyi's ambition is the same as Crow ancestors. Are you also a golden immortal? Lu Xiaoyi didn't hesitate. Isn't that too low? Every interior heaven's goal is to at least be a golden immortal. There are many who dream of Daluo. If they can achieve it, why can't I? Well, I'm slightly higher than they think. The three of them became serious. Here it comes. This guy's true colors are about to be exposed. Tinksy finally asked, I think Xiaoi's actions these years don't seem to be aimless. Do you have any specific plans? Goals? Lu Xiaoi smiled. I don't have any goals. I don't have any plans. I just want to clean Crow Ancestor's ass. Later, I realized that I couldn't clean it at all. Fine, then we'll all be covered in shit. When the era changes, everything will be broken. Xin Yuan has never been afraid of changes, so no matter how bad it is, it won't be that bad. The three old swordsmen finally felt relieved. There was no need to worry, because the worst-case scenario had already happened. Sure enough, Crow Ancestor's shit stirrer had a successor. In the future, let's just go wherever he goes. Chapter 1929. Chu Bai brought him to meet a few masters of body cultivation. This was just the beginning. Following that, people asked for help, people invited, and people went through all the heretical factions that had become forces. There were also some arrogant and conceited people who ignored him, but most of them showed signs of cooperation. Of course, their attitudes were like this, but their actual thoughts remained to be seen. He did this, and in fact, the other evildoers did the same. They found their seniors in the exterior realm, and through their influence, they could get twice the result with half the effort. It was unrealistic to rely on one's domineering aura to attract the fairies. They were all half-fairies, so who would submit to whom? This depended on the strength of their respective sections. That was why there were hands-free and marching monks, because the inheritance behind them was important in Buddhism. It was the same for Taoism. Lu Xiaoi's sect had influence in the Eastern Heaven and heterodox sects, the Sangung's connections in the Northern Heaven and the anti-space, Hong Tiangong's position in the Southern Heaven and the Orthodox Taoist sects, and Ma Bailu's three pristine's important history in Taoism. There was a lot to pay attention to choosing the kind of people to carry out such a lobbying task. They had considered it deeply and had been brewing since the selection of the foreign forcers. This was the rhythm of cultivators. Those who were strong but had no influence in their sects were destined to not be able to carry out such a task, such as Duan Li of the Western Heaven. The importance of reincarnation. The orthodoxy of the universe's cultivation world was too complicated, even more so for heterodox sections. It was not an exaggeration to say that there were 3,000 heterodox sects and 800 heterodox sections. In fact, it was far from enough to represent the heterodox sections. Lu Xiaoi couldn't visit them one by one, otherwise he wouldn't have to do anything else in the exterior realm. He came in contact with 7 or 8 main sects: sword vein, body vein, dead soul vein, spirit vein, and so on. Then, through their mouths, it penetrated layer by layer and gradually spread to the ears of every cultivator. During this process, good news kept coming through the Jade Booklet. The inner realm geniuses who had been sent out began to make progress. They used the art of retrograde derivation to track down the people who were using the heart compass. Among these people, there could be sellers or buyers. Screening them was not the task at hand, but to find them and put them on the list of people to be punished for the next stage of the investigation. Since there was no need for screening and interrogation, there were fewer conflicts. Of course, there were still those who had a guilty conscience, those who had bad tempers, those who had ulterior motives, those who stirred up trouble, those who misled the public with lies, and those who refused to cooperate. These people all had their own motives and intentions. However, under the rapid screening strategy of the inner realm geniuses, they could not achieve their goals. This depended on the abilities of the evildoers. If they were capable enough, their strategies were appropriate, and they did not get entangled. They also had a layer of official attire, so that those who wanted to cause trouble would have nowhere to go. In addition, the efforts of Lu Xiaoi among the higher-ups prevented the enforcers from falling into the predicament of the exterior realm cultivators as soon as they entered the realm of the exterior realm. From his point of view, the brain of the interior realm, led by Lu Xiaoi, was full of wisdom in the execution of the task. This was a basic quality. Although the roster of punishments followed the Jade Booklet system, whether it was the 5 decay mighty people with some privileges in the exterior realm or the exterior immortal monarch behind the Jade Booklet, they could not find out the truth. This was the right given to them by the heavens, eye, and the interior immortal monarch. Just like the information transmission system in his previous life, the exterior realm only provided the radio, but the code book was in the hands of the enforcers. From this point of view, among the 3 parties, the exterior realm being investigated, the interior realm being in charge of sending people, and the heavens eye carrying out the task had a very complicated relationship. It was full of playfulness. Lu Xiaoyi chose a very small spiritual cloud not far from the Sword Vein Cloud. There was no one there, so it was the place where he accepted the surrender. The evildoers had just started their pursuit not long ago. The exterior realm was too big, so it would take time to sweep through the entire realm. However, he showed that he would be lenient if he confessed and be strict if he resisted. At least, he could reduce some of the pressure on the evildoers. There were always those with poor psychological endurance, and there were also those who thought that the situation was trivial and did not matter. These people were his breakthrough point. Since the information began to spread, his small spiritual cloud had been visited frequently. In fact, they were all here to surrender and see if they could escape from this storm and become tainted witnesses. During this process, Lu Xiaoyi saw countless strange people. Name? Can I not say? You promised to keep a secret? Orthodoxy? What orthodoxy if you don't even have a name? It's wild, otherwise who will buy this thing? Who contacted you? In what way? Was it a close friend or a stranger? It wasn't her who contacted me, but me who contacted her. But it wasn't to watch the board. It was for dual cultivation. I was sincere, and in the end, she recommended this kind of plate to me. She said that after I studied it and unlocked more skills, it would be more harmonious and effective for us to dual cultivate. How's the effect? I haven't learned all the skills yet. Who is she? Can you not say? The condition for protecting your privacy is that you have to provide us with clues. If it's just a story, I went to the tea house and heard more ups and downs than what you said. Can I think about it again? Up to you. But you have to understand that confessing yourself and us finding you are 2 different things. It will definitely affect the next possible punishment. Many people in the main world below have died because of such transactions. If you don't buy it, how can you sell it? So karma is established, even if you didn't do anything. But if you help us find these people behind the scenes, you can make up for your mistakes and remove the karma. This matter is already known to the world, and it can't be hidden anymore. Interior immortal monarch, exterior immortal monarch, heavenly eyes immortal monarch, and of course the higher-ups of the immortal court are paying attention to it. There has to be a result. Some will be punished, and some will be educated. So, do you want to be punished or educated? I think I can still be saved. Who did you buy the board from? I don't know. I saw that they all bought it, so I bought it too. The things in the black market on the side of the road are not legitimate. The buyers cover their heads, and the sellers cover their faces. Who would reveal their details? You're so self-conscious. You follow others who break the law. You're itching when others poop. Okay, who are you talking about? Them? They're just like me, taking advantage of others. I can recognize them when I see them, but I don't know their names. Besides, if I really testify against them, wouldn't that make me seem like a bad friend? Friends? You don't know their names, right? Forget it. We may provide you with the faces of some people in the future, and you'll need to testify. But everything won't be leaked, and no one will know that you betrayed your friends. But how can you guarantee that you won't tell anyone? Chapter 1930. Lu Xiaoyi felt like his head was about to explode from the weirdos of the exterior realm. He could only try his best. Since he had accepted this mission, he had to try his best. In his heart, he had his own perseverance. The appearance of the heart plate had already caused many cultivators in the main world to suffer. They had no power to resist these evil half-immortals. Therefore, as a half-immortal, he was willing to help. With heavens, taking the lead, he had more confidence than dealing with it himself. Even if he knew that it was impossible to eradicate the root of the problem and find out the real mastermind, he could at least restrict such behavior on a moral level. The evil of human nature could not be eradicated. Such evil happened everywhere, including before the appearance of the heart plate. However, the core of the mission was to destroy such a market. Once a complete chain of interest was formed, it would be a real disaster. There were things to do and things not to do. The fight for the great Tao was normal, but there was a bottom line. Fortunately, there were many cultivators who had such a bottom line, especially those in the interior realm. They saw it as their duty to uphold justice and treated such missions as a test from the heavenly Tao. Their thoughts might not be righteous, but even if they were just pretending, they could still accept it if they pretended to be righteous. On this day, another guest came to the small cloud that Lu Xiaoyi was resting in. It was a guest with a high status in the sword vein. The fifth decay swordsman, Tu Muyun, was also the person with the highest realm in the sword vein. Lu Xiaoyi had met this senior of the sword range during his visit at the suiting pavilion. It could be said that they had met once, and he had helped Lu Xiaoyi a lot in his mission. As the sword cultivator with the highest cultivation in the sword range, his words were much more effective than others. He said respectfully, "Senior, your presence brings light to my humble dwelling. What advice does Senior have? If it is within Junior's ability, I will definitely not decline." In theory, such a person would not buy the heart plate and take it back to Peak. Firstly, it was because of the orthodoxy of the sword vein. Secondly, it was because of his cultivation. He cherished his reputation and would not do such a foolish thing. Tumiyu nodded slightly. "If I turn myself in, will little E spare me?" Lu Xiaoyi was calm and composed. "Senior, you must be joking. With your identity, it is not something that Xiaoyi can control. It is not even something that the immortal monarch can control. The only one who can give you a way out is the heavenly Tao. Senior, please don't make fun of us juniors. I've seen too many weirdos these days. My head hurts." Tu Muyin laughed heartily. "I'm just kidding. I know you're busy, but I have some personal matters that I need little Yi's help with." "Sorry for wasting your time," Lu Xiaoyi said seriously. "As fellow Sorvain, we should help each other. Please speak, Senior." Tu Muyun's expression turned serious. "I've been stuck in the exterior realm for tens of thousands of years. Now that I've reached this realm, I've encountered the change of eras. Was it a blessing or a curse? Recently, he often had the feeling that he would have to struggle to get to the top. The chances were slim, but he couldn't give up. Originally, I should have returned to my sect in the origin world before finding out the truth. Only then would I feel at ease. But now, it seems like I don't have the chance. I've always wanted to ask for help, but there was no one I could trust. I've lived for almost 20,000 years, yet I've fallen to this state. It's really laughable. Little E, you've come the right time. You're free now. After this mission, help me take care of my sect. I've received news that they've been having a hard time recently." Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. Take care of a sect? What does that mean? Is it to be a nanny? Or is it to be a nanny? The prerequisite for taking care of a sect was to be by their side at all times. It was a little ridiculous when it came to the depth of the universe. It was easy to think about taking care of a sect, but taking a trip there would cost him 1,000 years. His biggest loss on this trip was losing the convenience of the interior realm as a transit point. This was because the interior heaven immortal monarch saw that his half-immortals were too frequently using the interior heaven as a transit tool, wantonly traveling to and fro the void of the universe. This created a situation where half-immortals were flying everywhere in the main world, which led to more and more conflicts in the universe. Therefore, the new rule was that all interior realm deities had to enter the interior realm if their goal was to enter the realm. They could not turn back at the entrance. After entering the interior realm, there were old rules that regulated the frequency of entry and exit for the deities, such as the minimum time they could stay. In other words, every interior demigod had to carefully plan their own itinerary. They could no longer recklessly use the interior as a transit point and travel frequently. This also meant that Lu Xiaoyi had lost his most convenient way of traveling. This was the reason why he had never wanted to become an interior demigod. But this time there was no way to hide. Tu Muyun's sect seemed to be in the western heaven. It was not even close to the eastern heaven, which meant that this was destined to be a long and difficult journey. But he still would not reject Tu Muyun's request. Senior, don't worry. As a sword vein, I'll do my best. It's just that I can't be sure about the time. You know that I'm not familiar with the western heaven, and with this distance, I don't know how many times I can go back and forth in my life. Tu Muyun smiled. It's been hard on you, little E. The word care is actually the most difficult to grasp. Cultivators are not mortals. They can travel freely in the void, and it's impossible for them to stay together for long. I haven't had the time to care for my own sect for tens of thousands of years, so how can I ask others for help? One visit is enough to help solve some practical problems. How can I take care of them for a long time? If I can't help them, they should be destroyed. Who can carry them? It's just that with the changes in the universe, there are some difficulties that are more difficult to deal with. The old sword cultivator was very reasonable. He also knew the difficulties of being a sword cultivator. This young monster still had to guard his own sect. In fact, his responsibilities were very heavy. How could he find the time to take care of the sword range of another celestial phenomenon? But since he had made such a request, he naturally had a way to solve it. Little E, the most difficult thing is the distance. I have a way here that will allow you to move freely between realms that you're familiar with. Use the interior realm as a transit point to travel the universe. Little E, do you understand? Lu Xiaoyi was overjoyed. This was great. The transit point of the interior realm was gone, and now there was a transit point for the exterior realm. Understand. I used to use it often in the past, but the interior deity monarch is too stingy. Not long ago, he cut off everyone's path. Tu Muyun smiled. Actually, it's all about the same. But the exterior realm's heaven rotation also has various rules, so it can't be used casually. Otherwise, the universe will be filled with exterior realm half-immortals, and the main world will be very lively. I've been here for nearly 20,000 years, and I've found some small loopholes in the exterior realm. It's very convenient to use them. This method is suitable for you because you'll be able to sense the exterior realm in the main world after coming here once. You're not in the exterior realm Jade Book, but this isn't enough. Otherwise, how great would it be if everyone here had this kind of convenience? Here's a little trick. Let me teach you. Chapter 1931. Tu Muyun's explanation enlightened Lu Xiaoyi. It was different from using the interior heavenly transit technique, but there were also similarities. Only someone like Tu Muyun, who was in the 10,000-year-old Wither realm, would be able to understand its wonders. Xiaoyi, you haven't been to the region where my sect is, but in the western heaven, my scarlet star is very famous. The appearance of the celestial phenomenon is very unique. I have the most detailed star map here. I'll give it to you. It shouldn't be difficult to find the scarlet star. The changes in the universe are about to accelerate. Xiaoyi, I see that there's a deeper meaning behind your actions. You're not someone who goes with the flow. If you have a plan, you should be prepared. Lu Xiaoyi thanked him. To a cultivator, the greatest treasure in traveling through the universe was the star map. It was not something that could be easily shown to outsiders. It was just like how a city lord in the mortal world would not hand over the geographical map of his city to others. Of course, to them, there was no such thing as avoiding suspicion. Senior, you said that the changes in the universe are about to accelerate. What do you mean? Tu Muyun sighed. Countless people are studying the collapse of the Khanate Great Daos to determine their own cultivation or the direction of the forces in the region. To be honest, it's very difficult to study it thoroughly. In the end, it's mainly guesswork. I'm from the nature sect, so I don't study it in detail. I only look at the trend, and I've gained something else. However, among the 36 Khanate Great Daos, 3 of them are very important. If the entire heavenly Tao is compared to a magnificent building, the 3 of them are the most important pillars. 5 destinies, 5 virtues, 5 ties. Now that the 5 ties are collapsing in tandem, it means that one of the 3 pillars has been completely destroyed. If two of them are unstable, how long can the other two last? Just like a landslide at the beginning, there will always be small cracks in the ground, landslides, withering vegetation, pollution of water sources, and all kinds of strange phenomena. These are actually the signs before the big change. When the real landslide happens, it will only take a moment. 13 great Taos have collapsed, and the signs are about to pass. Next is the acceleration stage. That's why I said that all of this might happen faster than you think. It's not the 5,000 to 8,000 years that everyone assumes. Lu Xiaoyi nodded bitterly. If this judgment was true, it would be extremely bad news for someone like him who needed to master all the Tao realms. He might not be able to be in his best condition during the change of eras because of the lack of time. He would miss this crucial window of time and helplessly watch others fight for the fruits of the Tao while he was powerless to do anything. When he finally gathered all the Tao realms and fully comprehended them, there would be no more soup on the table, let alone meat. However, it had to be said that Tu Miyun's view of natural change was very reasonable. The process of change in nature was often like this. It was slow at first, then fast, and finally it collapsed. It was not that he did not realize this. So he had been strengthening his research on the remaining great Taos for the past 100 years. However, the problem was that there were still 23 great Taos left. What was the point of spending 100 years on 23 great Taos? Therefore, he decided to try his luck and buried his head like an ostrich. Now, it seemed that he had to speed up his comprehension of the Tao realm. It was the most important cultivation path. However, the problem was it possible to speed up his comprehension of the Tao realm? After Tu Miyun left in satisfaction, Lu Xiaoyi started counting on his fingers again. He picked out the remaining 24 great Taos and rearranged them. He confirmed those that he had some achievements in and those that he was completely unfamiliar with. Among the 24 great Taos, there were only 2 that he was sure he had completely mastered. He did not even need to rely on the Tao fragments. Those were the 5 elements and space. There were also some that he had mastered to a certain extent and were much more advanced than the basics. For example, yin and yang, destruction, lightning, life and death, power, cause and effect, reincarnation, and groundless. The rest were the great Taos that he had no idea about. They were misfortune, interception, destiny, inheritance, merit, holy virtue, nether virtue, time, creation, nirvana, origin, nothingness, and return to one. He had to make a learning plan. However, such a plan could never be made because there was too much of a factor in it. The Tao fragments were still his first choice for strengthening his learning. It was like a student needing a set of textbooks first. The only good news was that as he mastered more and more great Taos, the interconnection between the great Taos began to appear. This greatly improved his comprehension ability. It was a blessing in disguise. In this half-cultivation, half-government state, the first phase of their plan began to come to an end. From the statistics he had, including those that the demons had caught, those that the 6 of them had surrendered, and those that they had bitten each other out, the total number had exceeded 3,000. If he considered the fact that half of them had not been dug out, this number was shocking. This meant that the same number of cultivators in the main world had been killed. If they were scattered across the entire universe, thousands of cultivators would not even be enough for one world. However, if they were added together, it would be an extremely tragic case. Just as Lu Xiaoyi was about to set off to meet up with the rest, another guest came. It was the Body Meridian 5 Degeneration Strongman. He was also the existence that was closest to becoming an immortal in the exterior realm. Inspector Liu, we're about to part ways. I'll treat you to a drink. Lu Xiaoyi accepted it calmly. He knew that he had finally met someone who was important enough to him, a person who might have sufficient understanding of the overall sale of the heart disk. In the exterior realm, it was basically impossible for some stragglers to achieve such a level. Other than the most mysterious mastermind behind it, there must be the leaders of various orthodoxies in the exterior realm who participated in it. However, he didn't expect that after waiting for such a long time, a mighty person in the fifth decay actually came. The two of them drank in silence. The body meridian 5 degeneration strong man was straightforward, but he could not stand such silence. Little E, do you know the success rate of 2 Miyun's attempt to break through the gate of immortality? Lu Xiaoyi thought for a moment. I don't know much about the exterior realm, but if we use the interior realm as an example, I'm afraid the chances are slim. The body meridian 5 degeneration strong man sneered. Wrong. It's not that the chances are slim. It's that the theoretical success rate is 0. In the exterior realm, there might not even be a single person who can become an immortal in 10,000 years. Even if there is, it will be in the hands of orthodox Taoists and Buddhists. It will never be in the hands of unorthodox sects like us. Although no one has ever said it, it's the truth. These so-called quotas have long been decided. In the exterior realm, this is the unspoken rule. Whether it's old twos this time or my next time, we'll both be accompanying the crown prince in his studies. Everyone knows this. This is the reality of the exterior realm. Lu Xiaoyi listened in silence. Once the body meridian 5 degeneration strong man started talking, he could not stop. It was as if he had nothing to lose. Therefore, the ones who want to change the most are those of us from the unorthodox sects. The orthodox sects still have a path, so they are staunch protectors of vested interests. They are unwilling to change, but we are eager for change. This is the essence of your visit. Chapter 1932. Lu Xiaoyi naturally understood, but this was not a reason to kill the innocent in the origin world. He always believed that competition was normal, but you had to have a bottom line. Crossing this bottom line was no longer a competition, but a self-destruction of one's future. Bai Lisher continued. The body meridian is a disaster area, because us great cultivators don't have any restrictions on the half-immortals. Since we can't become immortals anyway, instead of waiting for death here and becoming a stepping stone for others to become immortals, we might as well take the initiative to change and see if we can find a chance to survive in this chaotic world. But now, it seems that someone from the immortal court has acted in advance. They're not willing to give us such a chance, so they sent you here. You can view this operation as an act of justice, but in fact, it can also be understood as a purge of the unorthodox sects. It depends on where you sit. Lu Xiaoyi did not agree. Senior, no matter where I sit, my attitude towards this matter will not change. Do you know that most of the cultivators who suffered in the origin world were actually from the unorthodox side? Our position determines that we desire change. But there are many ways to change. Forgive me for being blunt, but the heart plate method is the most unreliable, the most harmful, and the most unnatural method. Why don't you consider other methods? A person, orthodoxy, as long as you want to change, you can definitely change. The key is your determination. How much are you willing to pay? Sneakily, harming others, and being afraid of losing something, you are destined to not succeed. You will be cursed for no reason and will be used by others. When you have value, you will be given a sweet date. When you have no value, you will be kicked away. When something happens, you will be the scapegoat. Isn't this the portrayal of the current situation? Elisha looked at him and pondered. Then, what method do you think is useful? Is it what you think, or is it what you are doing? Lu Xiaoyi was watertight. Senior, you think too highly of me. With my position, I am afraid that I can't think of a specific method, let alone a plan. With whom? Sex with the true monarchs of the origin world? A character that the immortal court wouldn't even spare a glance, as was a leek that could be harvested wave after wave. However, there would definitely be another method that would be more thorough and subversive. Combined with the changing of eras, everything was not so far away. Senior, we are now in a great era. Great times call for great boldness. If we're still in an existing building, we'll knock a brick today and take a tile tomorrow. Once the time window is over, it'll be too late for regrets. Huli Lisher was deep in thought. Then you still think that the wind of buying a board cannot rise? even if most of the people involved are unhappy people like you and me. Lu Xiaoyi nodded without hesitation. It's not impossible. Instead, he must resolutely put an end to this evil trend. He had to take advantage of the fact that the situation was still under control and before it became an irreversible disaster. If it's just a purchase, we won't pursue the matter, and we can't pursue the matter. But if they were involved in the business, they would definitely wipe out everything. This was a matter of attitude. I know that many of the exterior masters are here to laugh at us. They think that since we can't touch the roots of the upper world, what's the use of messing around in the lower world? But I think that all of this is useful. It represents your behavior in the eyes of the heavenly axiom. If you can't do it, it's a matter of ability, but if you don't do it, it's a matter of ideology. I believe that no matter what the heavenly axiom becomes in the future, there's one thing that it must adhere to, and that is the order of the universe's cultivation. Then, do you think that things like the heart plate are beneficial to order or harmful? Cooley Leisure looked at him playfully. If there was an exterior master like me who was deeply involved in it, would you still persist? Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Of course. I'm here to express my attitude. Not to mention the 5 decay masters. Even if an exterior master immortal was involved, I would still persist. Moreover, I have to persist. Not only me, but also all the interior masters. If not, how can we show our attitude of eliminating the strong and helping the weak? To us, we're not afraid of the enemy's background, but we're afraid that the enemy's background is not strong enough. It's all an act. What's there to be afraid of? If we poke the sky, someone will naturally come to mend it. What's there to be worried about? Cooley Leisure was silent for a long time. He had both gains and losses in this conversation. More importantly, he wanted to know what this young genius of the sword vein wanted to do. Would he be like their sword ancestor who dared to pull down the great Tao? If so, he would consider whether the body vein was involved. This was a major matter that concerned the orthodoxy of a lineage. He couldn't jump to conclusions easily, so he came to test him. But he found that this little guy was good at pushing Tai Chi. His words made one's imagination run wild, but they were watertight. He was very familiar with this little guy's actions in the main world. It could be said that the things he did were not inferior to Li Wuya's in the past. But hearsay could not influence his decision. He still wanted to see this person's ability with his own eyes, and more importantly, his character. The gains and losses were equal. From the current situation, the losses were greater than the gains. Even if he admitted that the body vein was involved, this person had no intention of tolerating it. He could only say that this was a very opinionated person who was very clear about his own path. In the short term, it was a bad thing, but not in the long term. He decided to take a gamble. He wanted to test this person's bottom line. In the body vein, there are few people who are more deeply involved. It is also because of their existence that so many people in the body vein were unresigned to being involved. We have always relied on our bloodline, but after millions of years, the path of our bloodline has become narrower and narrower. Not to mention us humans. Even the ancient beasts of our bloodline ancestors have gradually withdrawn from the stage of cultivation history. The collapse of the great Tao seems to have nothing to do with our body vein. It is also because of this that everyone is anxious in their hearts when they see it. They only hate the limitations of their orthodoxy and can't participate, so they have the desire to buy and sell the great Tao heart plate. They want to participate in the changes of the great Tao and capture that trace of change. You know, that our body vein has always been indifferent to the Tao realm. At first contact, we really don't know where to start. The great Tao fragment is like a life-saving straw to us. Seeley let out a long breath and threw out his bet. In the body vein, there are 17 monsters who can go down to the main world. 4 of them are in charge of going down to collect the heart plate. The other 13 are unwilling to participate. The name list is here. I hope that even if there is a punishment, it will be according to the law and not based on the distance. In fact, Strongman was very clear that if he really investigated, these 4 people would not be able to hide. Investigating a case in the cultivation world was not as difficult as in the mortal world. There were many methods, and countless secret techniques. How could they keep a secret? Moreover, there were always voices of opposition in the body vein. Chapter 1933. At the predetermined location, the interior geniuses began the summary of the first stage. Among the thousands of suspects, they needed to find the real sellers and dig deeper into their background based on the information they had obtained. Among the thousands of people, only a few were willing to cooperate. Most of them did not trust the Empyreans of the interior and did not believe in their promises. They believed that betraying their friends would make it difficult for them to advance in the exterior realm and even cause them to be retaliated against. Therefore, there was not much valuable information, only a few dozen, including the information that Lu Xiaoyi had obtained from Strawman. Lu Xiaoyi presided over the meeting and was responsible for asking questions. First of all, do we need to continue with the first stage of the search? Now that we've locked on to more than 3,000 people, we can be sure that at least another 1,000 people will be caught. The key is it worth the time? Should we focus on digging deeper? Or should we widen the net first? Should we pursue time efficiency? Or should we work slowly? Marching Monk's opinion was very pertinent. I don't think it's appropriate to expand it further. How much more useful information can we get by adding another 1,000 people? We'll lose precious time instead, cutting the Gordian knot and digging deeper before they had fully formed an offensive and defensive alliance was the main point. Our biggest advantage is that we can exchange information through the Jade booklet. They can't, so they can only rely on word of mouth. If we drag on for too long, we'll wait until they've spread the information and cover it up gradually, increasing the difficulty of the investigation. Therefore, it's better to enter the second stage as soon as possible. The vote was unanimously passed. Lu Xiaoyi showed that he did not specialize, while Marching Monk showed that he had meticulous control of the overall situation. So, there are dozens of suspicious targets here. We can't investigate them all at the same time, so we can only choose the most valuable among them. Then, you can speak freely about the most valuable ones. Marching Monk was the most flexible. This is simple. 2 principles. One is to choose the most directional one, and the other is to choose the unorthodox path. I think that we'll divide into 10 teams with 4 people in a team, and Lu Jun will be in charge. Because it's very likely that we'll fight, we can't have too few people. We've already reached an agreement with the mainstream of the exterior realm, so there won't be any large-scale conflicts. However, small conflicts are inevitable. Everyone should be mentally prepared for battle. Everyone agreed that it was a good deed. This phase of the operation included locking up and arresting people. The Heavenly Eyes didn't allow them to be rough unless there was evidence. But if there was evidence, how could they interrogate the person without taking him into custody? This was also the most dangerous stage. Lu Xiaoyi complained to Qing Xian using his consciousness. Ma Lu, where's your usual agility? How could such a simple opportunity to show his face be snatched away by others? This guy's going to stir up trouble. Qing Xian said coldly, let him jump. If he doesn't jump, how can we get rid of him? It's not appropriate for you to ask, and I'll answer. We're both from the 5th ring. Right now, these people's biggest taboo is to listen to the orders of the same realm. This will make them feel insecure. Even if everything we do is for the public good, we will still be used by people with ulterior motives. It is better not to open our mouths. Also, the monk's 2 principles were actually missing the most crucial one. We should first find the suspects with the most concrete evidence. Only then can we act freely. Otherwise, once the wrong person was caught, it would be a matter of right and wrong. There would definitely be someone fanning the flames. This bald donkey was trying to stir up trouble. Does he think I'm stupid? Doesn't he know that we, the 3 pure ones, are the ancestors of this? Mother asterisk Kerr, I won't feel at ease until I kill him. I'll try to get it done once and for all this time. After spending so much time together, Lu Xiaoyi was very familiar with this friend of his. The biggest flaw was that he was narrow-minded. He was quite the vengeful type. Don't be fooled by his gentle and refined appearance. In fact, he would never forget what others owed him. The little notebook was engraved in his mind, and he would think about how to repay it all day long. The three pure ones had suffered great losses in the first great battle of the Fifth Ring. At that time, the major forces of the Fifth Ring had split up to fight against the enemy. The three pure ones were the main force fighting against the Buddhist sect. Among them were a few of his childhood friends, especially the three pure ones' fairies. Lu Xiaoyi had only heard about them from the three pure ones' perfected lords when he became the sect master and went to various places to learn about the Tao state. They said that they were innocent playmates who had agreed on the great Tao. It was a very platonic relationship. He, Lu Xiaoyi, could slaughter other people's realms for a woman by Hua. So what if his friend killed someone? He was very supportive. Ma Lu is Ma Lu. In terms of slyness, no one can compare to you three pure ones. Fine, we'll let him jump. When he jumps away, I'll cut him down with my sword. You're so thoughtful. Whoever dares to destroy the happiness of my brother's lower half, I'll destroy his happiness for the rest of his life. Qing Xian said angrily, Don't talk nonsense. Do you think I'm like you, destroying other people's orthodoxy for a woman? Also, don't pretend to be an honest person. You're obviously the chief disciplinary officer, but you want to leave the limelight to that bald donkey. Aren't you just digging a hole for him? When you wave your shovel, I know what you're doing. Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. Think of a way to punish that bald donkey's men at the most likely targets. Don't they want to stir up trouble? Let's help them. Give them a chance. Qing Xian understood this friend too well. You want to start a massacre? Lu Xiaoyi sneered. The essence of the cultivation world is violence. If we don't make a big deal out of it, the real masterminds and agents won't really show up. I don't think we can find anything through investigation. Cutting off any link will cut off our chain of clues. Only by fighting and letting them see an opportunity to mobilize their forces behind the scenes can we find out who's behind the scenes. Just wait and see. Fighting in the exterior realm, it's exciting just thinking about it. Qing Xian was speechless. This lunatic, he didn't seem to treat this place as someone else's home ground at all. Did he think this was the interior realm? However, he also knew that this guy's words made sense. The mission this time could be said to be simple, but it could also be difficult. How far do you want to go? Trace all the way to the immortal court? That was impossible. They wouldn't daydream about it. However, within the scope of the exterior realm, there could be different degrees of completion. For example, do you want to catch some small fish and shrimps to complete your task? Or do you want to uproot the middlemen and agents of the exterior realm? There was a big difference between the two. This lunatic's intention was obvious. He wanted to uproot the carrots. Qing Xian didn't refuse because he also didn't want to be perfunctory on the surface. He and Lu Xiaoyi were similar in some aspects. They both had their own bottom line. This was also the reason why they could become friends, living in fear and trepidation. Chapter 1934. The groups were quickly divided into groups. The principle was that the strong and the weak were paired up and mixed with each other. Everyone decided on their targets and split up. This was a job that required them to wear official uniforms to prove that they were authorized by the exterior immortal monarch and the heavenly eyes immortal monarch. If they resisted, they had to be careful of the consequences. However, if the cultivators disregarded life and death, this was the reason why Lu Xiaoyi and the others had to communicate with the mainstream higher-ups. In such a situation, they were most afraid that someone would incite a group of people to riot. If it was only a small group of people who resisted, they could at least resist for a while. Lu Xiaoyi was removed from the list because he was the first seat. There was an extra person among the 41 people. Did the military monk's suggestion seem reasonable? Among all the clues, only the body meridian clue had not been assigned yet. That was because the monsters were not stupid. They knew that the body meridian was difficult to deal with. They were so impulsive and gathered together. There was a high probability that this matter would fall on him. Then they just had to wait. The Prince of Destruction of the Western Heaven, Duan Li, and his group of 4 went straight to a cloud. He was from the Western Heaven. In the group, there were also Qi Fan from the Eastern Heaven, Shuofeng from the Southern Heaven, and Yudu from the Northern Heaven. This was a standard configuration of high and low. Of course, no one here would feel that they were the low one. Their target was a medium-sized cloud of spiritual mist, and there were a few heterodox half-immortals inside. In this heart plate incident, many clues were related to the cultivators here. Therefore, there was a high probability that this was a nest where the heart plates were stored. The cultivators here didn't just want to satisfy the needs of their own great Tao. It was very likely that they participated in the black market of the heart plates and acted as a distribution point. Identify their real bodies, lock them up, and interrogate them to extort a confession. If these people resisted, they could take them down. This was the step of their operation. After entering the exterior realm for a long time, they had a general understanding of the circulation of the heart plate underground market. There were regional agents, general distributors, sub-distributors, and small dens of the exterior realm. Then there were the insides of the various orthodoxies of the exterior realm. In the beginning, this kind of business model was still relatively strict. When trading, they would focus on investigating the specific situation of the buyer. They were very cautious. However, under the drive of profits, this kind of cautiousness soon existed in name only. This was the characteristic of businessmen. As long as they saw profits, they would rapidly expand like a rolling snowball. No one would pay attention to the problem of qualifications. It was too troublesome and would delay the business. Therefore, when Lin's son came into contact with a heart plate, there were many different rules. Later on, the rules became more and more lax. It didn't matter who you were, as long as you needed it. Here, the general agent and distributor did not charge a fee, because as long as the heart plate was used, it was equivalent to selling loyalty to them. The only question was when to collect this loyalty. However, the sub-distributors and small dens had to charge a fee, and it was a very expensive fee. This was because they had to find fragments of the Great Path for their customers, send people to the lower realm, and look for targets in the main world. All of these required a large amount of manpower and resources. There were two types of audiences. The first type was demons like Lin's son, who could find targets in the lower realm by themselves. However, as the business grew bigger, the number of demons was limited. Many people were still unwilling to use this method. Therefore, it slowly spread to the real half-immortals of the exterior realm. They couldn't go out of the exterior realm, so they had to buy on behalf of others. The chain of interest was getting bigger and bigger. This was only 100 years. If this business was allowed to continue for hundreds or thousands of years, it would be impossible to eradicate this evil unless the exterior realm was wiped out. However, it was also because it was getting bigger and bigger that it attracted the attention of the heavens, eye, and the celestial court. If you want to destroy people, you must first make them crazy. For cultivators, there are not many reasons that could make them crazy. However, fragments of the Great Path were definitely one of them. Duan Li and the other three entered the cloud. The closer they got, the colder their hearts became. This was because they could clearly feel the gathering of cultivators in the cloud. The reason was very simple. There was a Dharma conference here. This was the exterior realm, one of the major characteristics of the unspeakable place. This was the unspeakable place. There is still a trace of chaos left when the universe was first formed. It was filled with the power of various innate great paths, pure and majestic. The sound of thunder reverberated at the end of the sky. It was like a drop of water dripping in boiling oil. The entire unspeakable place was caught in the struggle of the innate great paths. It was a fierce struggle that couldn't be seen by human eyes. The cloud of spiritual opportunity rolled and rolled, gathering and dispersing, gathering and dispersing, gathering and dispersing, gathering and dispersing, slowly achieving a new balance here. The spiritual opportunity was limitless. It was the same as the interior realm, except that it couldn't be taken away. The half-immortals inhaled and exhaled to their heart's content here. After they died, they would return it to the exterior realm, completing a natural cycle. In the exterior realm, ranking was very important. It was related to the half-immortals' status, privileges, and the ranking of their immortal ascension. It was a very complicated set that the interior realm could never understand. There were 3 ways to rank high: Dharma Conference, Kung Fu Performance, and Skill Competition. Dharma Conference was the most important. This was the internal motivation for the exterior realm masters to be passionate about it. He reckoned that it was also a mobile market for the trading of hearts. Those who had goods and those who had needs would gather together from all over the world. While the people on the top would talk nonsense, the people on the bottom would pinch and rub their sleeves. That was probably what it meant. This was a small Dharma conference. Judging from the breath, there should be no more than 100 people. It was far from the scale of the Orthodox Taoist sect, which could easily reach tens of thousands. However, it was still an unbearable number for the 4 of them. Yudu asked, "Enter or not?" Duanli snorted. "Enter." The Dharma conferences of the exterior realm are notoriously long and smelly. How long do we have to wait? It's better to turn around and go to the next target. But what if the next target has similar difficulties? Continue to hide? Everyone, put on your official robes. I don't believe that many of these 100 people will dare to go against Yugu. Don't speak softly and don't try to negotiate. In a place like this, the best way is to show your identity and shock them. After you capture them, take advantage of the fact that they don't have a leader and quickly leave before they can react. This is the best way. Duan Li's judgment was not wrong. Considering the complicated situation, it was not a bad idea to cut the Gordian knot. This was a test of courage, responsibility, and determination. The interior realm masters were not bad at these things, so no one objected. Were they really going to go back home with their tails between their legs when they reached the place? Wearing the official robes was actually to show their names in the Jade Booklet. Every exterior realm master had a Jade Booklet in their consciousness. It showed their position and ranking, the orders they received from the exterior realm masters, or where a mighty person was holding a Dharma conference, and so on. When they let their names shine in the Jade Booklet, it was called wearing the official robes. Everyone present would feel it and understand that they were here for the Jade Booklet. It was like the Yamen constables who wore official robes to handle cases. They did not represent themselves, but the county magistrate. Chapter 1935. The 4 of them swaggered into the cloud, perfectly reproducing the unbridled arrogance of the local lords. Their existence on the Jade Booklet instantly made the 100 or so people of the spiritual assembly understand their intentions. Every gaze was filled with resistance. Some were disdainful, some were hostile, and some were malicious, but there were no friendly gazes. These days in the exterior realm, they had experienced too much, so it did not matter. According to experience, in the end, the vast majority of people would only be hostile. If they were truly asked to step forward and do something, who would be willing to offend the exterior realm immortals for this bit of anger? Duanli strode forward with his head held high, awe-inspiring and fearless. No one knew whether he was truly afraid or not, but he had to pretend not to be afraid. The Inquisitor is handling the case. For the exterior realm heart plate. Boss Jiao Wu Lauer, Feng Xiaowu. The 3 of you have an incident. Come with us. As for the others, this matter has nothing to do with you. Don't be impatient. Don't invite trouble. With a sweep of his divine sense, he had already determined the positions of the 3 people. Without hesitation, he immediately surrounded them. The only thing missing was a string of large iron chains in his hands. The scene suddenly exploded. It was different from what they had thought and what they had experienced in the past. The exterior realm half-immortals' reactions were very intense. Dozens of half-immortals stood out, automatically forming a line in front of the 3 criminals. Someone shouted, "We don't care who you are. You shouldn't have delayed our spiritual assembly. This is the exterior realm." When did it become the interior realm's turn to point fingers? The situation had changed. It was a test of the leader's ability to adapt. Should he continue to be tough, or should he soften his tone and reason? The situation was clear. Looking at the positions of the 3 criminals, this spiritual assembly should be called by them. Of course, those who came were their old friends. It was very popular to support each other in the exterior realm. because they had a very deep relationship with each other. Nearly 100 people gathered. As the saying goes, the law does not punish the majority. This was the root cause of trouble. Duan Li's mind raced. He knew that if he softened now, there would be no possibility of completing the mission. These people's so-called spiritual assemblies were held for 10 days to half a month. They were also held for 8 to 10 years. Knowing that they had come here to arrest people, he was afraid that more and more people would gather. This had to be resolved now. There was no time to delay. His divine sense warned his other 3 companions. I'll go in and arrest them. Open a passage for me. It was impossible to take down 3 people at the same time. Retreating was even more unrealistic. An interior celestial being could not afford to lose face here. Therefore, his plan was to take at least one of them. Then, he would leave with that person. Would this group of people chase after him? That would leave a stain on the Jade Book for disobeying the imperial edict. Instead of using his hands, he only used his mouth. That was a show of strength on the outside, but cowardly on the inside. Perhaps the next 3 would all be taken away. His figure flickered, and his Tao realm changed. He had already passed through the human wall. He instantly appeared in front of the weakest of the 3, Feng Xiaowu. This was a second blight cultivator. The 5 decays of the celestial being were the decay of the physical body, the decay of the magic power, the decay of the essence spirit, the decay of the lifespan, and the decay of the Tao heart. Among them, the first 2 had flaws in their battle prowess, and there were loopholes that could be exploited. Duan Li's strength was truly impressive, and his technique was also clean and efficient. Before he could even get close, the pressure from the Jade Book had already caused little 5 Feng to fall into a momentary daze. Then he stretched out his hand, and a vital Qi hand had already wrapped around little 5 Feng's body. It was the Archean Ian Cloud hand that made him famous. Once a cultivator was caught, they would be at his mercy no matter what realm they were in. Just as he captured little 5 Feng, his other 3 companions had already displayed their Tao realms and established a passage to leave the spiritual mist cloud. This was to prevent the group of exterior cultivators from attacking together. The 4 interior monsters cooperated well and moved quickly. However, in the eyes of the exterior cultivators participating in the spiritual conference, they could not help but be enraged. They did not expect that 4 mere interior youths would dare to attack an exterior cultivator. No one knew who was the first to attack. Anyway, with a start, there would be more to follow. Dozens of spells, various half-immortal weapons, monsters, and spiritual pets came attacking from all directions. The passage was established in a timely manner. Otherwise, Duanli alone would not be able to block so many attacks. After all, he still had another person in his hands. There were many tricks that he could not use casually. As the spells collided, the spiritual mist cloud showed signs of collapsing. The 4 interior monsters leaped out in a crooked manner and quickly fled. Behind them, dozens of exterior half-immortals shouted and followed like a swarm of bees. The situation was getting a little out of hand. To these interior monsters, there were 2 types of fighting in the exterior realm, a civil fight and a martial fight. A civil fight was just like what they were doing now. They were fighting while wearing official robes. I am an official and you are a thief. I was born to be superior to you. With the official prestige bestowed by Jade Booklet, not only did I have a psychological advantage, I could even use some simple combat techniques. For example, a masked thief was born to be inferior to an official. The official could shout, but the thief could only keep quiet. However, this kind of fighting style was also the easiest to provoke public anger. This was because you were not a real man. The other type of fighting was a martial fight. After taking off the official robes, both sides were equal opponents according to the rules of Jianghu. In the mortal world, if a martial fight was defeated, the thief would not run away. He could only obediently surrender to the official. Otherwise, he would not be able to survive in the underworld. Duan Li's fighting style was a civil fight. No one dared to kill. The interior side did not have such authorization, and the exterior side did not dare to completely offend Jade Booklet. This was the current situation. There might not be life and death, but the separation between the two sides could not be resolved. In fact, it was becoming more and more hostile. Nearly 100 people were holding a Dharma conference, and there were 40 or 50 people chasing after them. In the cultivation world, where everyone was wise to protect themselves, especially in the exterior realm where half-immortals were, it was impossible for half-immortals to make friends with 40 or 50 people who would rather offend Jade Booklet to stand up for them. North Wind communicated with his divine sense while flying. If they are not holding a Dharma conference, they are waiting for us. I think most of these people are participants of the heart plate incident. They're using this as a pretext to make trouble and calling for friends. There were a total of 10 groups of people in the interior realm. Certainly, it would not be like this everywhere. However, their group was more unlucky to encounter the collective resistance of these dealers. Dantian Chifan asked, "We have to make a decision. Do we let them go now and give up on this operation, or continue to lead them? If we continue to run, we should inform others for support. Otherwise, if there are more and more people of the exterior realm and we are intercepted, it will not only be the interior realm's face that will be lost. If this kind of resistance succeeds once, they will take a mile after taking an inch, and our future operations will become more and more difficult." Yidu also said, "Do we fight or keep the peace? We have to come up with a plan. We can't just bring trouble back like this. The other teams are also in trouble. How many people can you spare to help us? Why don't we just let them go?" Chapter 1936. P.S. Asking for a few monthly votes at the end of the month. I'm rolling on the ground. Thank you so much. Releasing Little 5 phone was not shameful. After all, the other party was already prepared. They were outnumbered. There was a limit to the use of official uniforms. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many officials forcing people to rebel, to continue saving face, or to rationally give up. That was the problem. North Wind immediately found the message from a Jade book. "Lord Lu wants us to get close to him." Duanli snorted, a little unwilling. As a hero of Western Heaven, he was unwilling to accept Lord Lu, who was favored by the people of Interior Heaven. But he didn't have a chance to challenge him directly. This guy appeared and disappeared mysteriously all day long. It was impossible to catch his whereabouts. It wasn't easy for him to appear, but trouble followed closely behind. This time it was the same. They wanted to do it cleanly, but in the end, not only did they not show their faces, they also showed their buttocks. The other party had gathered too many people. It wasn't entirely their fault, right? Get close to him? Could it solve the problem by getting close to him? He showed his face at the Interior Dharma Assembly and won the competition outside Hung River. Now that he was in Exterior Heaven, he still thought that he could do it? There was no time to think too much. Seeing that the other 3 were already showing signs of turning around, he knew that it was useless to oppose. He could only grit his teeth. We can't release him. Otherwise, all our previous efforts will be wasted. Everyone, let's go meet with the chief and see if he has a solution. North Wind pouted. He wanted to say something, but he didn't. If he let Xiao Wu go now, he would be hunted down. It was no longer Xiao Wu's problem, but the exterior master's dissatisfaction with interior master Tian's meddling in their internal affairs. Since it didn't make much of a difference, it was better to release him and give senior brother Lu more room to maneuver. If they brought him back like this, it wouldn't be settled without a fierce battle. But if it was too big and the relationship was completely strained, it would be difficult to achieve their purpose of handling the case. This Duanli didn't have great ability, but he had great ideas. He entered the enemy camp alone to plunder the enemy. He had started, but couldn't finish. Why bother? They were still wearing their official uniforms and hadn't withdrawn. This was a necessary precaution. This was because it took time for one's name to appear on the Jade Book. Of course, it wasn't because of technical reasons. It was because the exterior immortal monarch had been forced to give them this layer of protection to prevent them from abusing it. It'd be difficult to put it back on after taking it off. It would take time, and no one could guarantee what would happen during that time. There were tens of thousands of exterior cultivators and dozens of interior geniuses. They could not afford to be too cautious. The exterior cultivators did not try to hide their intentions and tracks at all. In fact, they even seemed to be very ostentatious. The geniuses of the interior realm immediately understood their intentions. This was a deliberate attempt to create a group incident. He didn't necessarily want to kill them, but he wanted to send a message to the cultivators of the exterior realm. As long as we unite, we don't have to worry about the investigation of the interior realm. He didn't even have to worry about being punished by the exterior immortal monarch. The law can't punish the masses. The exterior immortal monarch was, of course, one of their own. How could he feel at ease when someone came to cause trouble in his territory? How could he side with an outsider? Once everyone was aware of this, they would all come to the rescue when one of them was in trouble. They wouldn't even need to lift a finger. The thousands of exterior cultivators who were involved in this matter could blow these interior cultivators out of the exterior realm with a single breath. As expected, the number of pursuers grew larger and larger. There were already more than a few hundred people, and this was only because time was tight. Most of them had yet to arrive. In time, this group would grow larger and larger. Of course, how many of them were involved in the heart plate incident? How many of them were just there to watch the show? And how many had ulterior motives? It was impossible to tell. North Wind was very anxious because he realized that their group was bringing more and more serious consequences to everyone. Let him go. The four of us will split up and seek our own blessings. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. This was not a solution. It might cause them to lose face, but it could solve the real problem. If they let Feng Xiaowu go and the four of them split up, would the pursuers chase them or not? Which one should they chase? Once they split up, they would lose the momentum to cause trouble. At the very least, this matter would not be too serious. Yu Du and Qifan both agreed to this plan, but Duan Li was still hesitant. Feng Xiaowu was in his hands, and no one could take him away. He had to agree. Duan Li was in a dilemma. He knew very well that once he did this, he would never be able to muster up the courage in his heart. It would become a stain, and he would forever be an ordinary character in the interior realm. He would never be able to stand up straight in front of the swordsman. These three guys did not have any ambitions, but he was different. As the third evildoer to successfully transport the immortals during the interior spiritual conference, without the swordsman's cheating, he was actually just a slow-moving military monk. Why should he, with his strength, live under someone else's roof and live under someone else's nose? Just as he was hesitating, an aura rapidly approached from the front. It was too late to think of a countermeasure. It was obvious that the swordsman was also on his way. The encounter was right in front of him. Everything was a foregone conclusion. Looking at the slightly embarrassed four people in front of him, he had no complaints. There was no need. The last thing a good commander should do was complain about his subordinates being trash. Otherwise, even if they weren't trash, they would still become trash. This was something that would happen sooner or later. If they weren't in this group, they would be in another group, because this was the only way those guilty people of the exterior realm could resist. He had been waiting for this day for a long time. If it didn't happen, how would he have the time to waste here investigating them one by one? Luring the snake out of its hole was the best strategy, not digging rat holes one by one. That would tire him to death. Caught one? Good, good, good. You even brought a group? You guys have completed your mission beyond expectations. If all of you are like this, we can return to the interior realm to celebrate in a few days. Don't run, hide behind me. Let me meet these heroes of the exterior realm. Lu Xiaoyi swung his saber in the air and wiped the storage ring on his hand. A huge three-dimensional banner hung high in the air. Tian Mao and Enforcer Chief Lu, here to redress the grievances of thousands of wronged souls in the main world. The pursuers came one after another and tightly surrounded the five people, forming a big circle. But obviously, they didn't have the determination to surround and beat them up, because in the center of the circle were five people in official robes, especially the new one. He was shining in the jade book and the light was different from the other enforcers. Because the banner was very eye-catching, the matter was obvious. The number of heart plates they obtained from the exterior realm was equivalent to the number of lucky people who died in the main world. It might have nothing to do with them, or it might be their enemy, but could also be their own sect. Hundreds of people of the exterior realm, who were scheming and scheming, surrounded him. The crowd was in high spirits as a voice shouted, "Let go of Feng Xiaowu. Get out of the exterior realm. Otherwise, you will all be reduced to ashes in the public anger." Chapter 1937. P.S. It's the end of the month. I'm begging for a few monthly votes to save my face. I've almost been kicked out of the top 100. I have no place to put my face. Lu Xiaoyi was as steady as Mount Tai. Who am I? What am I here for? Presumably, everyone here already knew about it, but you might not understand my habits. If I don't interrogate the people I catch, don't even think about leaving alive. Duanli, if they dare to make a move, kill them and collect some interest. Duanli felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. No matter how jealous he was of the swordsman in front of him, he knew that he had brought a lot of trouble to the interior masters. A big trouble that might cause them to leave with their tails between their legs. But the swordsman's choice was beyond his expectations. He didn't expect the swordsman to be even more unyielding than him. He was so unscrupulous. Yes, he knew that he couldn't vent his anger at this point. At least he had to put on a show for the exterior masters. Even if he lost, he couldn't lose. The half-immortals of the exterior masters were in an uproar. Some impatient ones wanted to reach out. This was supposed to be a natural process of conflict, but now the 5 official robes were stuck in the Jade Book in the sea of consciousness, constantly reminding them that even if they killed these people in the end, they wouldn't have an easy time. It was like this in the exterior masters. Once they left the exterior masters, they would suffer the crazy revenge of the interior masters. You want people? Sure. Cross over my hurdle. Lu Xiaoyi's consciousness retreated. His name in the Jade Book began to dim and finally disappeared. Did I give up on the official robes? Did I give up on my life-saving amulet? I don't understand the rules of the exterior masters. It doesn't matter if it's one person or a group. Step over my body. If you can't, I'll take the vengeful souls of your main world. The eye of heaven has never changed in 1,000,000 years. Justice is in people's hearts. I don't need to explain. Whoever does something wrong must pay the price. I don't care if you're one person or 1,000 people. The grudges of Jianghu are settled in Jianghu. Wherever the corpse is buried, it's settled. Little Fifth Fang's fate is already decided. You can choose your own fate. Once he took off his official robe, it was obvious that he would not be able to put it back on as soon as the battle began. The battle with the exterior cultivators would then become a pure internal and external struggle. He was the one who gave it up. No one forced him. However, it was precisely because no one forced him that he was able to force the exterior heaven half immortals on the other side into a desperate situation. I'm alone. I don't want to implicate the Jade Book. Let's follow the rules of Jianghu. Whoever has the bigger fist gets to call the shots. Then, will you still swarm over? Duanli, Shuo Feng, Qi Fan, and you do. These 4 people didn't need anyone to teach them, nor did they need to remind each other. The moment Lu Xiaoyi took off his official robes, they also took off their official robes. Even the most cowardly person would have to face such a situation head-on. There was no other choice. This was the consequence of following a swordsman boss. You never know if you can see the sun tomorrow, and he was willing to do it. His blood was boiling. Madness was one of the most contagious human emotions. It made you lose your mind, forget your Tao heart, and disregard your future. The 5 interior realm youths stood there without compromising. The banner behind them fluttered under the spiritual vigor, as if thousands of vengeful spirits were howling. Lines of small words under the banner described the origins of these vengeful spirits. These are not collected by Lu Xiaoyi. Instead, they were provided by the heavens, to prove the righteousness of their action this time. It was only to give the geniuses of the interior more confidence. Now that they were placed here, they played a different role. Few of these names were Orthodox Taoists and Buddhists, but most of them were from unorthodox sects, just like the group of exterior half-immortals who were surrounding them. Some half-immortals sighed. What a sin! However, there were still some who remained unmoved. How determined were half-immortals? Those who sighed were basically people who came to watch the show. They accounted for more than half of them. Obviously, it was impossible to encourage everyone to swarm over and cut them into pieces. However, they could still deal with it according to the rules of Jianghu. Wasn't just 5 people, and they were so-called monsters who had just become half-immortals not long ago. In fact, they weren't real half-immortals. In the eyes of these old half-immortals who had lived for thousands of years, they were just silver spears. In order to boost morale, Second Brother Wu was the first to jump out. He shouted loudly, "The exterior realm cultivators have lived for millions of years. Today is the day to die for justice." Second Brother Wu. Before he could finish his words, the sky was already filled with millions of sword lights, covering the sky and the sun. It was a pure suppression of power, simple and violent. Second Brother Wu was only in the late stage of second decay. His magic power was weak, but under such pure power, it was the most dangerous target for him. Millions of sword lights spun and controlled the place around him. It was like a hollow ball made of flying swords, making it impossible for him to escape. In the next moment, millions of sword lights gathered together, and a gray sword aura that didn't seem powerful slashed down. All the defenses, from half-immortal artifacts to puppet beasts, from restrictive spells to talismans, and even half of the barely condensed auspicious cloud, were useless under this sword. The past and future of half-immortals were so clear that they didn't even need to search for it. With just one sword, Second Brother Wu's instigation was successful. He was using his body to fulfill his words. His death was transparent, but he didn't know if he could defend his moral integrity. The change was sudden. No one expected that this interior realm brat would dare to kill people after taking off his official robe. It was as if this was not the exterior realm, but the void of the universe of the main world. 2 people rushed out, one on the left and one on the right. They didn't do it on purpose, but they were Second Brother Wu's friends. They saw the power of the flying sword and knew that he couldn't block it, so they rushed out to help. But they didn't expect that they were not as fast as the flying sword. They got the position, but they were gone. Lu Xiaoyi was rude and domineering. He didn't ask for their intentions at all. The gray light split again, and millions of sword lights rolled out. At the same time, they rushed forward and danced with the sword river. After 2 breaths, the sword river dissipated. Lu Xiaoyi stood with his sword and laughed loudly. "Enforcer, I hold the sword and dare to be the first in the world. Demons and monsters, I'll send you to the netherworld. The great Tao of the universe belongs to the virtuous." What is virtuous? Don't bully the dark room. Don't feel guilty, and be magnanimous and selfless is virtuous. Because virtuous, the heavens bless. Since the heavens bless, what can't be cut down? This is not the sharpness of the sword, but the purity of the heart. I, Lu Xiaoyi, am here today to meet the heroes of the exterior realm. Are there any magnanimous people? He talked nonsense here, and the 4 people behind him felt their blood boil. Their hearts were itching. A real hero should be like this. Their previous worries were swept away. They couldn't wait for more people to rush over, so that they could have a chance to fight. Duan Li's heart was filled with ice and fire. The fire was that his fighting spirit had been aroused, and he couldn't help but want to rush up and kill. Compared to the wildness of a swordsman, his style was truly without an end. It was simply laughable. The ice was that his actions couldn't be hidden from a swordsman's eyes. He thought that he had brought a lot of trouble to the swordsman, but in the end, he gave him another chance to pretend to be weak. This was the case when one's level was not high enough. The same thing could be seen by different people. How could he catch up with such a person? Chapter 1938. Lu Xiaoyi's thunderous attack was unscrupulous and unreasonable. It immediately shocked most of the people present. Most of these people were here to watch the show. They did not participate in the heart compass business. Of course, they did not need to show their faces for those who stole the Great Way. Those who stole for the Great Way in the main world were also from the unorthodox sect like them. They grieved for the death of their kind. Even those who were really capable wanted to experience the power of the sword in another place, but they did not want to do it on the spot. They did not want to work for others. Those who had selfish thoughts were no longer pure. They had more considerations. Would the jade booklet go of their debts? Would the fiercest sword vein of the unorthodox sect take revenge? The other dealers were all hiding. Was it appropriate for them to risk their lives here? If the opponent was weak, none of this would be a problem. However, the opponent's strength made them have to consider more hidden dangers, especially those half-immortals from small dens. Their crimes were not serious to begin with. Would they make a big deal out of this mess? There were all kinds of worries. When they came aggressively, they were awakened by someone's iron blood. It was not a well-organized plan to begin with, so they naturally died of old age. That sword cultivator was right. If one's heart was not right, one would not be able to reach the Tao. What they needed now was a legitimate reason to fight to the death with the sword cultivators. If this reason itself was not tenable, how could they talk about morale? How could they talk about unity? They came aggressively, but after the three groups of celestial phenomenon disappeared, they were like scattered sand. The swordsman opposite them was a hurdle that they could not cross. Disperse? They did not dare to do anything after being slapped by their enemy on their home ground. In the eyes of the other exterior half-immortals, this was more serious than the heart compass business. Moreover, they were very clear that the exterior immortal monarch's punishment for the heart compass business was very limited. However, they would be punished even more severely for embarrassing the exterior. While they were hesitating, a half-immortal of the weakened realm stepped out from the crowd. I am Lu Yuzi. I happened to pass by and saw the interior cultivator showing off your power. I am secretly delighted. Why don't I ask Inspector Lu to weigh me and see if I am magnanimous and selfless? The exterior level half-immortals all let out a sigh of relief. Lu Yuzi, the famous itinerant immortal of the unorthodox school, a fourth blight cultivator, was currently in the decline of their lifespan, so it wouldn't affect their battle prowess. In the exterior realm, the vast majority of people were first and second blight cultivators. There weren't many who could successfully pass these two stages. The third blight could be called a major power. They were all reputable figures and were ranked very high in the Jade Booklet. As for the fourth blight, there was no need to talk about their status and strength. They could represent the face of the exterior masters. In the heterodox sects, such figures were few and far between. This Lu Yuzi was such a person. He had a wide circle of friends and was willing to help others. He had a good reputation among the unorthodox sects. With him stepping forward, at the very least, there would be a solution. Regardless of victory or defeat, the fourth blight wouldn't lose, right? Lu Xiaoyi put away his arrogance. He also needed a way out. Otherwise, could it be that he was really going to continue killing like this? The hardest part of acting was how to end it. He had to act big and end it beautifully. If he couldn't attract a lot of hatred, then he would have to act like a fool. He had his own arrangements and suitable candidates. Of course, it couldn't be Tinxi and the others who were also swordsmen. Strongman was a very good candidate. Unfortunately, before it was Strongman's turn, this Lu Yuzi had taken the initiative to jump out. In Lu Xiaoyi's plan, he still wanted to kill one or two more people to shock them. Then, Strongman would make a dazzling appearance. Both sides would fight fiercely, and in the end, they would be evenly matched. Strongman would praise the young hero, and Lu Xiaoyi would praise the old hero for being as good as ever. The real show of cultivation depended on acting skills. It was in this big show that there would be some evil moths from time to time. This was where the fun of cultivation's big show lay. He wouldn't let his guard down. If you thought it was a show, maybe it was a trap. Senior, please enlighten me. I dare not to accompany you, but I've said it first. The breaking of the heart has nothing to do with victory or defeat. Even if I'm defeated, I still have to investigate to the end. If I'm dead, someone else will take my place. Lu Yuzi smiled faintly. The heart has nothing to do with me, but the honor of being an exterior master is somewhat related to me. How about this? I won't bully you. I'll make 3 moves. If you don't die, it'll be my loss. Lu Xiaoyi narrowed his eyes. This old man was trying to trick him. Swordsmen's strength lay in their ability to control the rhythm of battle. It was normal for me to not be able to receive your ultimate skills. But if I can't receive your attacks, I can choose not to. Escaping and going to another dimension were all ways. Moreover, the principle of swordsmen was to take the initiative to attack and greatly reduce the opponent's means. That was the right way. If you let go of your hands and attack, it was equivalent to giving the initiative to the opponent, allowing the opponent to use his full strength and take what he wanted. This was very unfair to swordsmen. A swordsman couldn't fly freely with his flying sword and couldn't stay or leave as he pleased. This was equivalent to restricting his hands and feet, greatly reducing his tactical options. Why should I receive 3 moves from you? Why don't you receive 3 moves from me? Is it because you're old, so you think everything is natural? If you're deliberately guiding the younger generation, then you don't have to. This brat was brought up by a beating, not by someone's guidance. I'm a swordsman. I only gamble on life and death. It's the same, even if an immortal comes. Should I take it when others hit me? I'm sorry, but no elder in my swordsmanship has taught me that. Lu Yuzi frowned. This swordsman was difficult to deal with. He pretended to be a hero, but he didn't act like one. He was pragmatic, but he didn't have face. He wouldn't give up his principles just because of the vague favor of a 4th blight mighty person. If it were anyone else, they would definitely think, oh, this senior is giving me a way out. The main thing is to practice and learn from each other. In any case, we'll all have face if we boast about each other. This swordsman was very cautious. He treated fighting as an instinct and life and death as a way to improve. He didn't take advantage of others, but he didn't lose out either. This made it impossible for him to carry out his plan. To be honest, although he was a 4th blight mighty person, he was also extremely afraid when he saw the sharpness of this person's sword. It wasn't a simple problem that could threaten him. It was a problem that could really kill him. He really had nothing to do with the heart compass. At his level, he had to see further than others. He knew that there would be a day when this kind of thing couldn't be concealed, so he hid far away. But he needed reputation. He needed to improve on the Jade booklet. This was because there was a saying in the exterior realm. When the era changed, the chances of the upper realm would be much higher than usual. He would soon reach the 5th blight. If he calculated the time well, at the end of the 5th blight and Taoist heart decay, he would be able to catch up with the era change. He was a conservative person. He preferred to use his own familiar method to take the last step. He had this condition, so why should he learn from others and take the risk? But when he took the last step, he needed a higher ranking in the Jade booklet. At least he could let the heavenly axioms see him. In the eyes of those 1st and 2nd blight cultivators, he was high and mighty. But in the eyes of those real giants of Taoism and Buddhism, he was nothing. It's just a toad lusting after a swan's meat. The Dharma assembly couldn't help him because his Dharma assembly could never be compared to those authentic audiences. Therefore, he didn't give up any chance to become famous all these years. Like now. Chapter 1939. But this swordsman actually didn't accept his conditions. Lu Xiaoyi's rejection surprised everyone. Did he really want to be buried here? They didn't understand Lu Xiaoyi's thoughts. At the level of a monarch, he could tolerate failure, because at that time, he didn't have his own power. But it was different now. He was no longer the previous him, an influential figure in the East Heaven main world, an interior heaven who held the position alone, the number 1 friend among women. He didn't only have himself. There were many people behind him who supported him, so he couldn't be defeated so easily in public like before. even if the opponent was a 4th decay senior. From now on, he had to win step by step and appear in front of the world as a victor until the end of the era. 4th decay was very difficult to deal with. It was equivalent to the early stage of the ancient techniques, second severance. In a life and death battle, he could rely on the swordsman's sharp maneuvering and wait for an opportunity to move. Maybe the situation would be very passive, but he could definitely kill this old guy. But if he only received 3 moves here, then he could only be passive. Moreover, he wasn't sure what other thoughts this person had. The situation fell into awkwardness. But fortunately, cultivators had divine sense besides shouting. Lu Xiaoyi's heart was as hard as steel. He could only start with Lu Yuzi. He didn't accumulate battle power and didn't walk the dangerous path, so he naturally didn't have to worry too much about this. Young Master Lu, I have nothing to do with this matter. I'm just casually obtaining a reputation from this matter. So why be so cautious and overbearing? This matter is beneficial to you, so you can step down from the stage. This is the way of cultivation. Lu Xiaoyi didn't back down. Senior, you want to obtain reputation, and I want to obtain power. How to obtain both? Although reputation is good, it also depends on the specific environment. Obtaining it now is like pulling chestnuts from the fire. Even a wise man wouldn't do it. Lu Yuzi's tone was cold. Young Master Lu, are you not giving me any face? Since I've come out today, I won't back down easily. Lu Xiaoyi gave tit for tat. Sorry, you chose the wrong environment and the wrong person. He had even chosen the wrong general trend. So what was the point of talking about prestige? It's just a low-level reputation that can't be put on the table. Those who are suitable are just some petty thieves. Are you sure this kind of reputation is useful to you? Lu Yuzi asked, how so? Lu Xiaoyi began to bluff. Reputation responds to the general trend of the universe. Dancing with the wind and following the waves is true reputation. Otherwise, if he were to go against the current, he would be nothing more than a cloud in the wind or a reef in the sea. Today, there's a change of heart. Not only is it the time to punish evil, it is also the opportunity to lead the way. Let's see how you choose. This is a good opportunity to shout out, to put an end to theft and restore my clarity. Based on Senior's reputation among the heterodox sects, you are able to persuade people to mend their ways, and you are able to follow the wishes of the Lord of Immortals. In the future, when the era changes, this is a heavy stroke. Isn't it more ingenious than you holding countless Dharma conferences and gathering undeserving disciples? Reputation needed to respond to the situation. Eat crab dipped in ginger sauce. Here you are obsessed with giving both sides a way out, but you can't see the general trend that the heavenly axiom has tacitly agreed to. Let me ask you, are you here to joke? Lu Yuzi's heart trembled. He knew where he was wrong. In fact, the matter had long been clear. The exterior Lord of Immortals gave way. The interior Lord of Immortals attacked, and the power of the heavens' eyes brazenly intervened. These were not for nothing, but because they saw the situation clearly. Therefore, they had to show their attitude. This was why there was an interior monster challenging the exterior. Then, as a major cultivator who still had expectations for the future, should he take advantage of the situation, or go against the trend? Or should he be like him and try to take advantage of both sides? He suddenly realized that under the impact of the trend, no one could take advantage of both sides and please both sides. When he suddenly understood the key point, Lu Yuzi immediately showed the decisiveness of a four-blight mighty person. He glared and shouted, I won't back out so easily. This concerns the dignity of the exterior. There will be a battle between you and me. But there are priorities. People are close and people are estranged. There are right and wrong in the Tao. Barbaric killing and stealing the great Tao are also not recognized in the exterior. I'm here to tell you that a few pieces of rat feces can't spoil a pot of porridge of the exterior. Most of the onlookers here are virtuous and self-disciplined people. The fact that hundreds of people gathered here and didn't attack you is a clear proof. The old man's words were a little rushed, so it seemed a little stiff. It didn't matter. Lu Xiaoyi was a smart person. Of course, he knew how to help him. I'm willing to visit at a suitable time and listen to the elders' teachings. But now is not the right time. I'll take this opportunity to make it clear to everyone here that I'm also willing to invite a master like Senior Lu Yuzi to spread the word. Making mistakes isn't scary. What's scary is making mistakes again and again. Only punish the chief evil and not the rest. In the peaceful land of the exterior, there are more people like us who punish. If you feel awkward, we feel awkward too. Why don't you speak your mind and end it early? As he spoke, his figure moved like lightning and instantly appeared in front of Boss Jia. The way he raised his sword made the others not dare to make any strange movements. Even those so-called friends around him unconsciously took a step back, unwilling to get involved in this dispute. Lu Xiaoyi held the sword in his hand and shouted to the crowd, "I'm punishing Boss Jia and conferring the title of Little Five. It's not for personal grudges, but for the truth. These people's final destination is not me, but the jade book hanging high. Enforcer Tianyi, welcome everyone to spread the clues. I'll still say the same thing. Whoever bought the plate and who made a small mistake, these are not the problem. All the criminal records are stored in Tianyi and will be erased. I mean what I say." He waved his hand and led the four people to slowly retreat. The hundreds of exterior half-immortals saw this and struggled in their hearts. They couldn't take this lying down, but they were also afraid of taking action. They were conflicted, and in the end, they hoped that others would stand up for them. But at this time, they had lost their spirit. Who would really stand up for them? Lu Yuzi saw that it was a good opportunity, so he raised his arms and shouted. Heads can be broken, blood can be shed, but the ambition of the exterior cannot be lost. I want to establish an unorthodox, self-disciplined Dharma assembly here, where people can come and go freely. There's only one thing that is the foundation, and that is to be honest and to be strong and independent. When we restore the unorthodox atmosphere of the exterior, it will be the day I challenge the madman of the interior. Where we lose face, we will pick it up. But first, we have to be strong and live up to the heavens. The listeners were all moved. Everyone expressed their feelings and was willing to help the old half-immortal. In an instant, most of the hundreds of people present promised to join the Dharma assembly. The old man was scheming. Not only did he make a name for himself, but he also gathered strength for himself. He took himself as the self-discipline initiator of the exterior unorthodox self-discipline. As for the challenge, who would care about something that wasn't guaranteed? Chapter 1940. The five interior masters were leisurely escorting the two dejected criminals. They didn't even think about escaping because of that terrifying swordsman. North Wind was the most excited, Chief Fan was the proudest, and Yudu was the most active. They were self-aware and had never coveted the position of the head of the interior masters. Being able to solve the problem like this was the result of the superior. Moreover, it was foreseeable that there would be more people who wanted to be the head in the future. The only way to solve the problem was when the exterior masters became the target of everyone's ire. Most importantly, they showed the exterior masters an uncompromising attitude. This was very important. While flying, Duanli suddenly turned around, ignoring the other three. Lu Jun, do you know that I purposely caused this incident? Lu Xiaoyi smiled. Of course you did it on purpose. If you didn't do it on purpose, how could it have led to such a good situation? Duanli saw that he didn't understand and explained. What I mean is, Lu Xiaoyi interrupted him. I understand. Ever since we stepped on the path of Taoism, entered sex, and learned Taoism, which one of us isn't a dragon among men? After thousands of years, we've all become independent. We mean what we say, and we're the best. Everyone is like that. At this point, no one is here to be someone else's underling. North Wind and the other two also understood something. They looked at Duanli strangely. You did it on purpose? You're playing with us, aren't you? They didn't say anything because the person in question was Lu Xiaoyi. Buddhism has its own way of thinking, Taoism has its own way of thinking, and unorthodox has its own ambitions. We're human because we want to improve. I want to improve, so I should understand other people's desire to improve. Marching monk, from the perspective of Buddhism, I also understand what he's doing. He feels that he's at a disadvantage. If he doesn't fight, he won't be able to. It's just like when we fought when we were young. If you can't win, you'll naturally throw sand at your crotch. I won't deny that if I have a chance, I'll kill him directly. But I also know that people like him can't be killed completely. As long as Buddhism exists, you'll always have to face such opponents. Lu Xiaoyi looked at them. But my target is not him. How short-sighted must one be to be so calculative over such personal grudges? In the grand scheme of things, it was just a wave. If he wanted to bury a few whirlpools in it, the one who would be buried in the end would be himself. That's why I didn't try to persuade him, nor did I try to explain. He deserved it if he got out of hand. If there was a chance, I would help him dig a hole. If your mind is straight, you won't be able to step in. If your mind is crooked, you won't be able to stop it. Why should you care about him? Lu Xiaoyi said earnestly, but we're different. We were both born in Taoism, so there are some things that I have to say and explain. The future of the universe will be dangerous. How could one person accomplish anything? The 36 innate Taoists were indeed shocking. It was not a single plank bridge where one could push others down and cross it. We should stick together and help each other find a balance between the group and the individual. That's what we should do. He let out a long laugh. I'm a bit of a loner, but he had never let his friends down. It's not that I want to be the leader, but my goal is different from yours. I want to get to know more people in the hope that when the day comes that I can't pass, there will be friends who will lend me a helping hand. The four of them were deep in thought. They all knew that Xuanyuan's background was really different from the others. The pressure in the future would only be heavier than theirs. This was the legacy of history, and it could not be avoided. Duanli nodded. I understand. As long as I'm alive, I'll definitely be there. Lu Xiaoyi joked. A person's life is a life of acting. I also want to keep a low profile and pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger. But the problem is, can I keep a low profile? Then I can only act, and act to my death. You have to be mentally prepared. When I speak, it won't be a small matter. Bei Feng did not care. All right, I'll wait for your big matter. Let's see how big it is. Lu Xiaoyi and the other four escorted the two criminals back to the preset cloud of spiritium and began to interrogate them. Then, the others began to come back one after another. The information finally began to be enriched. In this aspect, the military monk's contribution was huge. Thanks to the help of the Buddhist forces, they did not encounter many obstacles when arresting the suspects. It was the same for Qing Xian and the others. The foundation of Taoism in the exterior realm was much stronger than in the interior realm. In fact, except for Duan Li's accident, the other directions were under control. This provided a solid foundation for the work to be carried out later. As the information gradually gathered, the people's hearts began to change. Qing Xian was very dissatisfied. You're playing with fire. Have you ever thought that if you lost control, it would bring immeasurable damage to our operation? Lu Xiaoyi played it down. We can't lose control. It's just a test of the bottom line of both sides. We have righteousness in our hands. How bad can it be? Just wait and see. The mainstream Taoism secretly pushed it. The orthodox Buddhism added fuel to the fire, and the major forces of the unorthodox school made their stance clear. Now there's the opportunist Lu Yuzi among the stragglers. The direction of the wind is changing. We just have to wait quietly. In fact, I've always thought that this kind of method of handling cases would not work in the cultivation world. It's not the mortal world. You can't catch their real weakness at all. Qing Xian was silent. This was actually the judgment that both of them had long determined. The key was not how to solve the case. The most important thing was to eliminate this trend and put an end to such a situation in the future. As for how many big fish they could catch in the process, it was up to fate. I'd like to know, Xiaoyi, if you didn't solve the dispute on the spot and let it fester as you wished, how would the monk clean up the mess? You shouldn't ask me this. You should ask the monk. Actually, you can think about it from another perspective. If the three pure ones were behind it, what remedy could you take? Qing Xin thought for a while. What else could we do? We could only ask for help from the exterior senior brothers and borrow the power of Taoism. It seems that the military monk also has the same plan. Xiaoyi, you've ruined their plan again. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Ma Lu, don't worry about him. Let him continue to jump. We'll just watch from the side. There'll be a day when he falls into the pit. At that time, we'll cover it up. Qing Xian disagreed. Don't underestimate this monk. I'm afraid that you'll fall into the pit before he does. Hurry up. I have a feeling that this trouble is not over yet, but I don't know where it is. We're still too unfamiliar with the exterior, even if we have the support of our sect. Your sword vein is better. You don't know that in our orthodox Taoism, the ancient method and the deteriorating state are very opposed. This time I want to ask for their help, but I only passed with a slight advantage in the discussion and won their support. But this kind of support is not reliable. We can't count on it completely. Chapter 1941. Lu Yuzi once again expanded his Dharma gathering group. But this time, it wasn't a lecture. Instead, it was a cleansing of thoughts promoting the exterior realm and the reputation of pure cultivation. In the cultivation world, such a reputation was actually very laughable. Horses wouldn't get fat if they didn't eat grass at night, and people wouldn't get rich if they didn't have external wealth. As for cultivators, if they didn't have any special encounters, how could they widen the gap with others? Therefore, everyone had always treated the existence of the heart plate as if it had nothing to do with them. Other than a few people who had a strong sense of justice, no one thought that it was a big deal. This was also the reason why no one cooperated with the inner realm geniuses when they came to investigate. But now that things had developed to this point, the situation was obvious. The attitude of the immortals was a bit firm, and the enforcers of the interior realm were even more stubborn. The investigation, which they thought was just a formality, had turned into a serious direction. Feeling this trend, there were naturally some half-immortals who started to take sides. As for which side they were on, there was no need to consider. The Taoist sect had its own Taoist organization, and the Buddhist sect had its own Buddhist connections. They had their own set of systems to pass down. Only the heterodox sects were more scattered, and they did not have a unified organization to restrain them. This was especially true for those stragglers who were unwilling to be influenced by the sword lineage, body lineage, and other major heterodox sects. And Lu Yuzi provided such a place for these people to express their attitude and sincerity. Actually, it meant that they had to remove themselves first. Lu Yuzi seized this opportunity and easily expanded his originally narrow circle to an extent that he didn't expect. There were actually so many stragglers. This was something he didn't expect. This made him secretly happy, and he worked even harder, sparing no effort in promoting the correct cultivation atmosphere. After a period of time, the results were very obvious, which made him very satisfied. One day, a monk came to find him. He was very unfamiliar in the third decay realm, but from his breath, he could feel that this person was vigorous and authentic. He was a direct descendant of Buddhism. There was no mistake. Both sides greeted each other, and the monk went straight to the point. Buddhism has a suggestion. In order to ensure the prosperity of the exterior realm, considering that the enforcers of the heavenly eyes won't stay for long, it's a big problem to maintain the atmosphere of the exterior realm after they leave. If they rise from the ashes, then what we have done will be meaningless. Therefore, it was necessary to establish such an organization in the exterior realm to purge the heart pagoda and prevent similar inhumane acts in the future. This required everyone's hard work. It wasn't something a single family could accomplish. Today, I came to look for fellow Taoist Lu because I hope that fellow Taoist Lu can take the lead. When Lu Yuzi heard this, his heart skipped a beat. This was an opportunity that couldn't be any better for him. In this short period of time, his reputation soared, and his ranking on the Jade booklet greatly increased. But after all, there was a limit to the number of stragglers and when the limit was reached, there was no point in mentioning it. He was vexed over this matter these days. However, he did not expect that someone would give him a pillow just when he wanted to sleep. If he could really establish a supervisory organization in the exterior realm, his prestige and influence would definitely rise to another level. Without this reason, why would Buddhism and Taoism take a fancy to him? This was the perfect opportunity. However, he had not been smashed by the pie yet. Why me? Haven't you Buddhists and Taoists been in charge of leading the army for millions of years? How can we, the heterodox sects, gather together? The monk smiled and stretched out 2 fingers. First of all, there are very few Taoists and Buddhists participating in the heart plate business. You heterodox sects have the most. This is the truth, isn't it? Since this is the truth, of course, it's most appropriate for you to take the lead. Otherwise, whether it's Buddhism or Taoism, the more we manage, the more rebellious we will be. Wouldn't this turn a good thing into a bad thing? Lu Yuzi nodded. What he said was reasonable. In the exterior realm, no one could resist the orthodox Taoists and the direct descendants of Buddhism. However, it was one thing to not be able to resist. It was another thing to feel disgusted and not cooperate. This was also the last pride of heterodox sects. If Buddhism and Taoism were really in charge, not to mention how far they could go in the future, the internal strife would be tiring enough. The monk continued, secondly, for millions of years in the exterior realm, I don't need to tell you the relationship between Buddhism and Taoism. It has never been good, not only in the exterior realm, but also in the interior realm, the main world, and even the immortal court. This is a disagreement that can't be resolved. Therefore, what Buddhism supports, Taoism will definitely oppose. What Taoism advocates, Buddhism will definitely reject. This is also an ironclad fact. Therefore, it's better for fellow Taoist Lu to take the lead. Since you have the righteous cause, things will be much smoother. Do you still have any doubts after I say this? Are you worried that Buddhism will set a trap for you? Lu Yuzi was completely moved. Not only would he increase his reputation, but he would also follow the general trend and make friends with Buddhism. This was killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Okay, where the Tao is, it's my duty. I'll take the lead. However, if the organization is really operating, we still need Buddhism's cooperation. The monk laughed. Of course. Otherwise, why would I come to you? Everyone is doing this for the exterior realm. You're not the only one. Buddhism and Taoism also need to bear a lot of responsibility for the current situation of the exterior realm. If everyone keeps to their duties, the interior realm people won't have the chance to come here and be arrogant. Lu Yuzi agreed decisively. He thought that this year was really a good year for him. Good things came in pairs, and he couldn't stop them. The only doubt he had was Buddhism really so devoted to the public? Or did they actually have other plans? He couldn't figure out at the moment, but he knew very well that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. After the encirclement of Duan Li's group, the aftermath gradually fermented. As a result, people began to turn themselves in enthusiastically because of the firm attitude of the enforcers and their promise not to leave a criminal record. With this foundation and the guidance of the mainstream forces of the exterior realm, the selling of the heart plate became a despicable act that everyone in the exterior realm despised. This kind of direction couldn't be changed by any immortal's order. It required the rendering of the environment and the participation of everyone. However, the interior realm monsters successfully grasped the essence of the task and turned the situation in their favor. When the public opinion of the exterior realm was confirmed, everything had an answer. There were a total of 19 organizations and individuals who provided the heart plate. With the guidance of the Jade Book, no matter how big the exterior realm was, there was no place for them to hide. This time, the interior realm monsters attacked like thunder. Lu Xiaoyi issued a strict order to kill anyone who resisted arrest. The 4 enforcers led the team separately, revealing their ferocity. However, as they expected, no one resisted arrest. Everyone understood that since they couldn't go beyond the exterior realm, there was no point in resisting arrest. Everyone chose to obey and handed their future to the Jade Book. There were still a few unsatisfactory areas. Chapter 1942. First of all, the general agent of the exterior of the heart plate had not been found. This person was extremely good at hiding and had not shown up for decades. No one could accurately describe his figure, appearance, or origin. He was like an ever-changing demon lord who always appeared in different forms. Most of the time, he did not even appear and only delivered the heart plate at the agreed location. Since he did not receive any fees, there was basically no way to investigate further. As for the so-called evildoers who were in charge of the specific execution, they had already scattered and fled to the main world when the people of the interior realm ascended to the exterior realm. There was no place to look for them. This was the most regrettable part of this mission. But they could not do anything about it for the time being. There was a limit to a person's strength. There was no perfect solution. Even if they eradicated it this time, they did not know what would appear next time. The chaos of the universe and the change of eras were the hotbeds of evil that could not be stopped. Fortunately, no one was killed in this punishment mission. There were only a few real battles. The only time someone died was when Lu Xiaoyi died. All of this depended on their grasp of the whole mission's purpose. Contacting the major mainstream forces was the cornerstone of peace. Lu Xiaoyi's wild massacre was a stroke of genius. Using both soft and hard methods was the right rhythm. 41 people gathered in the cloud of spiritual opportunity. Their prisoners had been released long ago. This was also what the heavenly I had repeatedly asked them to do. They only had the right to handle cases and not to execute them unless they were obstructed by violence. Anyway, they could not run away. The exterior realm was now a big cage. Still a little unsatisfied? I keep feeling like I haven't used my full strength. Is this it? Hong Tiangang was very disappointed. You should feel lucky. In the nest of the exterior realm, facing tens of thousands of half-immortals, how do you want to use your full strength? If there is a chance, everyone will be unlucky. Third watch reminded. Speakerphone said, do we still need to look for clues among these people? Find the person who provided the method to refine the heart plate? Qing Xian continued, no. There are too many suspense and too many cover-ups. It will delay time, and we may not be able to find the truth. I think the higher-ups don't necessarily want us to find it, right? If we really find it, do we still investigate? How about we go up to the immortal court to be enforcers again? The monsters chuckled. It was the propriety of cultivators to know when to stop. Everyone present who had reached this level of cultivation understood this principle. Among the many major events in the history of cultivation, which one could really get to the bottom of it. Putting an end to such behavior would be the greatest success, San Gung said. If that's the case, then our mission can be considered to have come to an end. The final issue was how to write the report. Which ones need to be reported to the Jade Book and be punished by the exterior immortal monarch himself? Which ones need us to fulfill our promise and keep the secret for others? How should we control the balance? There was a disagreement among the interior enforcers on how to control this degree. Some suggested to report all 19 organizations and individuals, while others suggested to set up a threshold to see how many people were harmed and how many people were sold. There were also those who said that they had to consider whether or not they would cooperate after being caught, and that they could reduce their punishment based on their merits. There was endless debate. In the end, everyone looked at Lu Xiaoyi. Now, he was not only the backbone of the interior monsters in name, but also in a more practical sense. Even some of the monks admired his character and strength. Lu Xiaoyi said indifferently, but very firmly, how can there be an absolutely fair method in the cultivation world? My opinion depends on the method of the transaction. If they only sell hollow discs and don't provide the Great Tao Heart Plate, they cannot report. If they provide the Great Tao Heart Plate, it means that such people have connections with those monsters of the exterior who can casually descend to the lower realm. They will really be affected by the karma of stealing and killing people, so they must be reported. In addition, those so-called half-immortal monsters with names and names who help the sellers and the evildoers not only have to announce their details, but we also have to kill them if we meet them in the main world in the future. Although the Heavenly Eyes mission has ended, the bottom line in the hearts of cultivators will never end. This is my position, and I hope it's also your position. Everyone responded with a loud roar. Indeed, among these 19 organizations and individuals, there were indeed some who bought and sold hollow discs. Who knew if they still had a conscience? Or if they didn't have enough connections and couldn't find monsters of the exterior who could descend to the lower realm? In theory, there was karma, but the karma wasn't obvious. In fact, in the cultivation world, fights between cultivators, killing for revenge, plundering and destroying planets were all too common and could be found everywhere. If you joined the team of cultivators, you had to have this tolerance. If you obtained good things and couldn't protect them, who could you blame? Strictly speaking, if this was a completely disorderly cultivation world, this kind of situation was really nothing. Slowly, it became a situation where those who obtained the Great Tao Fragment would no longer dare to show it to outsiders. This was the progress of cultivation, so there was nothing to be surprised about. But now they had to stop this evil trend because of the current special universe environment. The change of the era was imminent. If you couldn't stop one evil trend, then there would be countless evil winds blowing, and you wouldn't be able to stop it even if you stopped. The scope would also be wider and wider until it involved the cornerstone of the mortal world. Therefore, it wasn't that this kind of method of plundering the Great Tao was cruel, but this kind of method couldn't be allowed to run rampant in this kind of universe environment. The history of cultivation was going downhill. It was huge and would slide faster and faster. In order to avoid sliding to the bottom of the mountain and crashing into a car and dying, they had to step on the brakes in advance. This was the purpose of strictly controlling the business. After waiting for everyone to speak freely, Liu Xiaoyi still followed his habit and began to vote by raising his hand. It wasn't that he wanted to talk about democracy, but for these real elites of the half-immortals to really capture their hearts, he had to give them a sense of participation as the master. Otherwise, there would only be one result, and they would gradually drift away. It was also because of Liu Xiaoyi's seemingly superfluous style that his competitors would never be able to compete with him. Because he talked about democracy, others could only talk about democracy. But Liu Xiaoyi's fans were even more numerous. Hence, his democracy was actually a coercion. You could see through it, but you couldn't crack it. It was that simple. In the end, Liu Xiaoyi's method with an absolute advantage won the approval of the interior monsters present. With a strategy, the next step was very simple. With two people waving white paper fans, the marching monk and Qing Xian did the statistics and quickly came up with a final list. 97 half-immortals of the exterior, 135 exterior geniuses. This was definitely not all, but it basically accounted for the majority. Coupled with the current solemn atmosphere of the exterior, the matter of the heart plate could be foreseen to be coming to an end. Chapter 1943. After a few rounds of verification, there was no mistake. The collective decision was made, and the authority was given to be. In other words, Liu Xiaoyi could report as the chief disciplinary officer. The person to report to was the exterior immortal monarch. In the end, he would come out and control his subordinates. This was his right. The interior immortal monarch would not care about these trivial matters. The report to the Heavenly Eyes immortal monarch was also dispensable. Liu Xiaoyi checked again himself. There was no mistake. Thus, the breath was sealed and approved. At the same time, he made fun of Qing Xian. "Ma Lu, don't you feel that it's too easy? You have to get used to it. When you work with me in the future, this is the normal pace. What did go wrong? The biggest risk was already solved in the conflict a few months ago. When I, the half-immortal Liu, am involved, there is no need to avoid it." Qing Xian snorted. "Boast, then boast as much as you can. Sooner or later, you'll fall into the trap. Don't call me then. Crawl out yourself." Lu Xiaoyi was proud. Ma Lu, don't be jealous. You rarely see people who are agile. There is such a person in this world. They don't take the usual route when handling cases. They go straight to the core. This is a talent that ordinary people can't learn. What is the chief? This is the chief. Everything was ready. After reporting, they had completed their task. They could leave or stay as they pleased. However, no one would stay here. On the surface, they had achieved some success and cleaned up the atmosphere of the exterior. However, only God knew how many people were dissatisfied with them behind the scenes. Without the official uniform, any disputes would be pure Jianghu grudges. No one would pursue the matter if they died. Wrapping his consciousness, Lu Xiaoyi sank his mind into the jade book in his mud pill palace and sent out the intention to report. Suddenly, the entire jade book shone brightly. This was a scene that only appeared when something big happened in the jade book. Before this, it had not appeared for thousands of years. It could be seen that at the level of immortals, the matter of the heart plate was still very important. Perhaps this was a show for the immortal court? In the exterior realm, everyone noticed this change, and no one missed it. After all, the jade booklet was something that appeared in the sea of consciousness of every exterior realm cultivator. It was a projection of the superior will. In this regard, the rules of the Kuan Dao Convention were somewhat similar to the jade booklet. In fact, everyone knew what was going to happen next. Over the past few years, the enforcers had been tormenting everyone. It was a collaboration between the three immortal monarchs. They couldn't fight them, and they couldn't get close to them. It was better for them to get lost as soon as possible. The dense fog dissipated slightly, and the names of the 41 interior enforcers began to appear on the huge jade book. The 4 enforcers were at the top, and each of them had their own brilliance. Later, as the chief enforcer of the Heavenly Eyes, he would report the results of his investigation through a jade book. The whole process would be made clear to all the demi-immortals of the exterior realm to show impartiality. It meant that he would report the results of his work to the leader. Lu Xiaoyi did not beat around the bush and spoke concisely. Disciple of the interior realm, enforcer of the Heavenly Eyes, Lu Xiaoyi has 41 people. It took me many years to travel all over the world. I am loyal to the heavenly way and the exterior realm. My conclusion is as follows. There are 13 exterior realm nests, involving 97 people. The list is as follows. Jianxiang Han, Emperor Yin, Yu Jiang, Treading All Flowers, Emperor Wu Yi, Song Jian, Candy Bean, Zhao Wuji, Shui Yin, Qing Luo, Wan Dong, Unfulfilled Crush, Ant Wanted to Fly, Su Chongqing, Indefinite Candle. There are 35 exterior realm geniuses who all participated in the killing and seizing of Dao in the main world. The list is as follows. Ma Tian, Jin Huan, Hong Jin, Huai Su, Clear Spring, Time, Shining Guts, Unchanging Green Mountain, Growing Flowers with Tears, Taiyu Yuedao, True Monarch. It doesn't matter, Xiao, Jingli 20 Years of Autumn, Bright Moon, Cool Breeze, Creeks, Woodland Sloth, Scars of Autumn, Luo Mu. These people have committed grave sins and have all fled to the origin world. In order to eliminate all evil and prevent future troubles, we Heaven's Eyes cultivators will obey the will of the heavens and the will of the people. We will continue to pursue them. This is the end. Chief Enforcer Lu. These words appeared on the jade booklet. They were shining brightly and were extremely obvious. To the tens of thousands of exterior realm half-immortals, the scale of 100 people was not worth mentioning. In this chaotic world, the number of cultivators who died from internal strife and natural causes was more than that in a year. Therefore, the practical significance was not great, but the psychological impact was great. Obviously, the Heavenly Eyes Enforcer meant that the distributors would be handed over to the Jade Booklet to deal with, depending on the attitude of the exterior realm immortal monarchs and the major forces of the exterior realm. However, the enforcers would continue to pursue those exterior realm geniuses who had blood on their hands and were on the run. Of course, this was only an attitude and did not have much practical significance. The universe was so big, where they find 100 people scattered around. If they were in danger, they could escape back to the exterior realm. These interior enforcers would not be able to pursue them without their official uniforms. This made everyone breathe a sigh of relief. There should be rules, but the biggest obstacle that hindered the development of the cultivation world was too strict. It would make the entire cultivation world a stagnant pool. If everyone followed the rules step by step, how could there be any fun in cultivation? Once they entered the cultivation world, their life and death were not up to the heavens. The nature of the law of the jungle could not be changed. At least on this point, the Heavenly Eyes Enforcer's name list perfectly reflected this spirit. Other minor cases, such as those who bought large amounts of goods, were not mentioned here. It could be considered that the enforcers had fulfilled their promise. If they kept their promise, they deserved respect. All in all, this was a result that all parties could get through. After the enforcers were aggressive in the beginning, they finally returned to the normal pace of the cultivation world and did not cause any trouble. This made the exterior realm half-immortals secretly nod their heads. Talented interior and exterior realm cultivators were all cultivators. Lu Xiaoyi's conclusion was hung on the Jade Booklet for a long time. It was not that the Jade Booklet was slow, but it gave the exterior realm half-immortals a chance to speak freely. If they had any opinions or dissatisfaction, they could raise it now. Of course, it also depended on their status and whether their opinions were important or not. If an unknown first decay or second decay raised some rubbish opinions, it would delay everyone's time. It would be an opportunity for them to show their faces in public. Don't expect the Jade Booklet to punish them. Time passed slowly, and no one raised any opinions. In total, there were only slightly more than 200 people. This made the half-immortals who had been worried that the punishment would be too heavy and the impact would be too wide speechless. As a cultivation world incident that could be big or small, such a solution was really suitable. Although the exterior realm half-immortals did not have any opinions, someone else did. The Jade Booklet. That was the exterior realm immortal monarch. A line of golden words appeared at the top of the booklet. Heavenly Eyes solution. Acceptable. The scope of the list, acceptable. Additional conditions. The Heavenly Eyes Enforcer should keep all the criminal records of this investigation, including those who are exempted from being held accountable. Lu Xiaoyi controlled his breathing. He had been waiting for the last demonic moth. Like Qing Xian, he was actually very worried that this mission would go smoothly, but he did not expect that the one who raised the additional conditions would be the exterior realm immortal monarch. Going shirtless? On the Jade Booklet, the chief enforcer's question appeared. Why? The Jade Booklet showed, because the rectification cannot be stopped. The exterior realm immortal monarch has already set up a rectification team. He needs enough detailed background information. Chapter 1944. Lu Xiaoyi was still calm. This is not in accordance with the agreement. Yu Shu said. Where is the agreement? Is there a deed? This is just a rule that you set for the convenience of investigation and evidence collection. Yu Shu did not agree. Neither did Tian Mao. There is no such rule in the interior. Cleaning up the atmosphere is a process that requires a long time. It can't be cut off in one fell swoop. After you leave, the heart plate business will definitely revive. At first, it will be a spark, then it will burn. You need a similar organization to persevere. Then, the cultivators who are familiar with the heart play trading will become the main targets of observation. You all have the obligation to hand over this information to this new organization. Only then can you guarantee that the exterior realm won't make a comeback. This is far more practical than your so-called hunting. Where's Lu Yuzi? The entire exterior world was caught off guard by this sudden change. A cultivator's faith was more important than anything else. It was because they believed in Tian Mao's justice that they turned themselves in. If this was all a scam, who could say for sure that this was purely the intention of the exterior immortal monarch? Or did the exterior immortal monarch and Tian Mao already have a consensus? Set up a trap for everyone to fall into? The other enforcers might not know, But the chief enforcer must know. How could he act so righteous? In a certain spiritual cloud in the exterior, Lu Yuzi was drenched in cold sweat from head to toe. He had tried so hard to defend himself, but he still fell into the monk's trap. No response. You were the one who requested Yubin to set up a cleansing organization, and you even prepare the personnel for it. Now you flatly deny it and throw away the responsibility? You still want to be ranked? If you offend Yu Shu, the incarnation of the exterior immortal monarch, you don't even know when you will lose your life. Respond? I will become the public enemy of all the half-immortals in the exterior. You want to know everyone's secret? Do you have the qualifications? Do you have the ability to keep your mouth shut? Buddhism was actually in cahoots with Yu Shu. This was the result that he could not imagine even if he racked his brains. However, it was too late for regrets now. He had to choose the lesser of two evils. He could only brace himself and control the image of Yu Shu in his mind, engraving his thoughts on it. I'm Lu Yuzi. I'm not virtuous or incompetent. The only reason I'm occupying this position is because I want the glory of the exterior and want to do my best. This organization is not an unorthodox sect. Although I am the leader, I have the guidance and reminders of Buddhism and the slight cooperation of Taoism. I promise everyone here that all the information is stored in this old man's mind. Unless there is a second offense, I will not reveal the slightest bit. If I violate this oath, I will be struck down by the heavens. The old man's words had already displayed his wisdom to the extreme. Since he could not refuse, he could only guarantee that the information would not be leaked. At the same time, he also vaguely slandered the Buddhist sect. What do you mean by guiding and reminding? In other words, he was instigated by the Buddhists. He was also a poor person who had been deceived. Of course, he was very smart. He knew that he could not offend both systems at the same time. Therefore, his next sentence was to express his goodwill to the Taoists. What do you mean by slightly cooperating? It means that the Taoists have nothing to do with this matter. It must have been hard on the old man. In a hurry, he managed to remove himself from the situation to the greatest extent with just a few words. Who knew if the other party would be satisfied? Not only did he not steal the fish, he also caused trouble. When Lu Xiaoyi saw this, he already knew in his heart that the monk had silently made a move again. This time, it was not to obstruct everyone's investigation, but to destroy his image of being true to his words and deeds. It had to be said that this move was indeed very evil. In comparison, the trouble that Duan Li and the others had caused previously was just a smoke bomb. They knew that he could solve it and lowered his vigilance. Now, the final blow was the fatal one. It made him lose face and lose everything. At this point, he would become the public enemy of all the exterior heaven half-immortals because he did not keep his word. This was a soft knife. Also, it was obviously irrational to use force to deal with a swordsman like him. Lu Yuzi had removed himself from the situation. For the time being, no one was willing to pay attention to him because the most important thing now was whether or not Inspector Liu would hand over all the name lists and criminal records. After handing them over, the next unlucky person would be him. He did not know whether or not he could withstand the harassment and threats of countless half-immortals. Therefore, a person could not be arrogant. Step by step, one had to walk steadily. If the steps were too big, it would hurt one's balls. He should not have accepted that monk's suggestion. If he could not see it clearly, then he should wait until he saw it clearly and not jump. Yugu did not admit that he had a contract with Lu Xiaoyi. In theory, it was tenable. In this cultivation world, there was no need to make a detailed contract before doing anything. There were dozens of pages that included all the possibilities. As long as someone did something evil, there would immediately be corresponding clauses to bind them. Here, everyone's description of the matter was very vague, all kinds of vague because the Great Tao was also vague. As for the specific task, except for the few rules that were drawn at the beginning, in fact, there was only one sentence. Act according to your discretion. Do whatever is convenient. Therefore, it was convenient for Lu Xiaoyi and the others, and they also completed the task. However, If Yugu insisted on a certain aspect, you could not say that he was just messing around. He just did not follow the rules too much. What rules did immortals need to follow with half-immortals? Once bitten, twice shy. Whether or not he could become wise was a matter of the future. The problem now was how to cross the chasm. Lu Xiaoyi's expression did not change. He was still calm and composed. I implore the great immortal to take back the order, because this is not only related to me, but also the credibility of all 41 enforcers. Not only did they suffer and take risks without any rewards, but in the end, this is the result. This is unreasonable. There are many ways to clean up the atmosphere of the exterior. It is not necessary to follow the previous model. There are countless talents in the exterior. Is it difficult to eliminate a certain phenomenon in such a closed environment? Those who have not been reported should be treated the same as everyone else. They should not always be suspected because of what they have done. Once something bad happens, they should be the first to be considered. This is a reason why I am not willing to expand this list. Who could be faultless? If there is something wrong, change it. If there is nothing wrong, add to it. Looking at the history of each of us, who dares to pat their chest and say that they have never made a mistake? So, this matter ends here. We have found these 232 people. We have reported it. The rest are innocent. Lu Xiaoyi's words were tactful and tough. In the ears of tens of thousands of exterior half-immortals, everyone had to give him a thumbs up. If these were his true words, he was worthy of the name of Chief Lu, especially those who had not been pardoned for their mistakes, or those who were purely buying. They were deeply moved. They cannot be nailed to the pillar of shame forever just because they had done something wrong. This was what they agreed with very much. They agreed with this chief. Not only could he be the chief of the interior, he could also be the chief of the exterior. Chapter 1945. Who should be blamed for this sudden change? Lu Yuzi didn't seem to be in the wrong. He had good intentions, but he couldn't see through himself. But if it weren't for Lu Yuzi, would this purge organization not exist? Not necessarily. Was it the fault of the exterior immortal monarch behind the Jade Booklet? That didn't seem to be the case. He was also thinking for the future of the exterior immortal monarch. It would be better for a complete handover after the enforcers left. It would be beneficial for future work. No one was in the wrong, but now the situation was stuck here. No one could advance or retreat. Now, it was up to the immortal monarch's attitude. In history, there didn't seem to be any history of an immortal monarch compromising with a half-immortal. This was the dignity of an immortal. It couldn't be violated. Sure enough, the words at the top of the Jade Booklet changed. It was still tough and didn't change its original intention. Hand over register. This isn't a discussion with you. The entire exterior immortal monarch fell into a dead silence. Every exterior half-immortal stopped what they were doing, stopped cultivating, interrupted the Dharma conference, and withdrew from meditation. Those who were fighting also stopped fighting. Instead, they all paid attention to the Jade Booklet in their minds. To cultivators, this wasn't a trivial matter that was dispensable, and it was related to the vital interests of every single one of them. Privacy protection. This was also the most important aspect for cultivators. They couldn't be watched by the Jade Booklet just because they were in the exterior immortal monarch. This was the principle. It concerned the bottom line. It was the bottom line of a cultivator and also the bottom line of a person. To put it bluntly, if you didn't have any secrets, how could you stand out? But today, right now, the Jade Booklet was challenging their bottom line. This didn't seem to be right. The exterior immortal monarch wasn't a fixed immortal. The immortal court would choose who would be the immortal monarch, and not the people below. There was also no need for a public announcement or a meeting. The huge gap in the level itself was a kind of pressure and also a necessary mystery. Therefore, no one knew how many immortal monarchs had changed in the past million years. No one knew their names. They just called them immortal monarchs or simply Jade Booklet. The Jade Booklet rarely directly ordered a half-immortal. There was no need, and it wasn't equal. Usually, it would secretly achieve its goal through the 5 decay of the exterior immortal monarch. The Jade Booklet was in charge of the rankings. Who dared to disobey it? They all had a rush to curry favor with her, fearing that they wouldn't understand her well enough and wouldn't be able to slip away smoothly. However, if the Jade Book had truly expressed its opinion, then the half-immortals below it would have no choice but to comply. There would be no other choice. Throughout history, there were also cases of arrogant people who were disrespectful to immortal lords. Regardless of the reason, they were punished on the spot, and it was common for them to die. Inspector Liu was not a celestial being of the exterior, so he had the right to refute once. But since he was now in the exterior, he had to obey the immortal monarch's wishes. This was the privilege of the immortal. You can despise it, but please don't come to the exterior. Therefore, when Immortal Lord Jade Book reiterated his words, the outcome was basically decided. There was no more suspense. The list of the people who had participated in the Heart Compass sale numbered in the thousands. It would definitely be grasped by Immortal Monarch, Liu Yuzi, and the others. Then, it would become a sharp sword on the heads of all the half-immortals who had made mistakes. None of the interior cultivators had expected such a turn of events. From the initial success to the present failure on the verge of success. In terms of practical results, there was no doubt that their goal had been achieved. But in terms of mood, they did not have the slightest bit of joy, because they had succeeded, but they had also been slapped in the face. Qing Xin knew this guy's temper and was afraid that he would be stubborn, so she hurriedly reminded him. Am I right? You fell into a trap, right? The kind that can't climb out. Don't be silly. The exterior immortal monarch will not be merciful to you. He might not kill you, but severe punishment is inevitable, and it will ultimately affect your path of Tao. You have to be clear about the severity. Even if you listen to him, the exterior cultivators will first resent Immortal Lord Jade Book. You will be second, and you won't be the only one. With 41 of us carrying it together, the impact on each of us will be limited. Liu Xiaoyi gently shook his head. Qing Xin only knew one side of the story and did not know the other. In his current situation, on the path of gathering momentum, he could not leave any flaws on himself, whether it was physical or mental. Only then could he ensure that he would continue to move forward. Time was short, and he did not have the time to make up for this loss of state of mind. Moreover, was it really just a little impact? Immortals were high and mighty, and their dissatisfaction towards them would quickly fade away. Only they, who were also half-immortals, would be hated, and it was not just 141st, but he would have to bear the majority of it alone. He was the first seat, and there would be people adding fuel to the fire. He would not be able to escape the reputation of breaking his promise. The favorable impression of the exterior heaven half-immortal that he had painstakingly fought for would also be gone. No one would think that he was forced, and everyone would only say that he was in cahoots with the immortal monarch. He could not back down, because he came from a special orthodoxy, because he had a different ambition. He would not plead anymore. This was not a swordsman. He took a deep breath and removed the part of his memory related to the name list from the scroll of mental strength. Because this part of his memory had a mysterious connection with the Jade Book. The name that appeared on the Jade Book could not help but fluctuate, as if it would disappear at any time. At the same time, a line of words appear behind his name on the Jade Book. The name list is gone. This kind of decisiveness was beyond everyone's expectations. It was as if the two of them were going against a bull. One was forcefully suppressing, the other was indomitable. However, one was an immortal, and the other was a half-immortal. Was the stubborn struggle of an ant meaningful? But what happened next told everyone that it was meaningful. Liu Xiaoyi did not speak, but Yin Qing Xin immediately understood his meaning. This grandson was really a big disaster, and she could not be associated with him. Following that, Yangming used his mental power to erase the part of his memory about the list. At the same time, two words appeared after their names on the Jade Book that were starting to fade away. Gone. Duanli was almost on par with them, gone. North Wind, Qi Fan, Yudu, Sangung, Hong Tiangang Hua Hu Jinyao. Hands free, marching monk. One by one, The interior enforcers expressed their attitudes on the Jade Booklet and erased their memories. Some of them were fired up, while others were helpless. There's nothing left. There were no heroic words. There was no heroic spirit. There were only 41 words that said, "Gone," which shocked tens of thousands of exterior experts. At the same time, a burst of will spontaneously rose up and went straight to the brain. The exterior and exterior realm had been fighting for millions of years, and for the first time, the exterior experts had a feeling of admiration for the interior experts. This was the backbone of the ancient method. However, the present method was not a weakling. Liu Yuzi had been looking for a way to reverse the situation. He had waited and waited, and finally, this opportunity came. After the interior enforcers expressed their attitude one by one, he finally gathered his courage and took the biggest risk of his life. 2 words appeared under his name on the Jade Book: rejected. He was only faster by an instant. Soon after, all the exterior level half-immortals had the same attitude behind their names: rejected. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, until it covered the entire Jade Book. Not a single person did not express their opinion. This kind of momentum formed a torrential momentum that pierced through the exterior realm and rushed up to a high place. Chapter 1946. P.S. Looking for a guaranteed monthly ticket. For the first time in millions of years, the inner and outer scenic heavens stood together. Was it to fight against the celestial? No one would have thought that there was someone with such charisma. Such charisma. It made the half-celestials, who had always planned their cultivation career calmly, to be impulsive. Qing Xian had mixed feelings. This grandson was starting to show his prowess. Don't lead everyone astray. The marching monk's heart was dead. All his schemes were crushed into powder by the swordsman's unreasonable hot-bloodedness. He was an evil person, but he was building momentum for the other party. What was more terrifying was that such hot-bloodedness hid many far-reaching schemes. His attitude had been made clear. What was left was the Jade Booklet's judgment or punishment. The Jade Booklet continued to top. Very good. Since you are persistent, you must know the price. Do you like to forget the past so much? Then I'll help you this time. I'll also let you know that the dignity of a celestial will never be challenged. The cloud of spiritual vigor that the interior enforcers had gathered abruptly exploded. 41 people were blown away without any resistance. They could not even control themselves. Among them, 40 accomplices were only blown away. They were directly blown out of the exterior heavens and were thrown into an unknown void of the universe. What followed was a long journey back. Only Lu Xiaoyi was added. When the spiritual clouds moved slightly, he knew something was wrong. Even if he was facing a celestial, he had to immediately unsheathe his flying sword. However, the difference in strength between them was too big. This was also the exterior heavens, which was the Jade Booklet's territory. Before his flying sword could completely drill out of his Niwen, he felt his mind go blank, and then he lost consciousness. Even the exterior heavens and half-celestials could feel this power. This was the real power of a celestial. The power of heaven was unpredictable. Although they were not at the scene, they only saw the 41 names on the Jade Booklet. All of them were dim and then suddenly disappeared. That was the sign of being expelled from the exterior heavens. There was only one name, which was also the name at the front. It could no longer be described as dim. It simply melted into the background and turned into nothingness. It was the chief of the interior enforcers. They did not know whether this person was alive or dead. However, just by looking at the appearance of the name, it didn't seem to be a case of death because there was no spiritual opportunity to release feedback. Combined with the words on the Jade Book, I'll help you erase your memories. The truth was very clear. This stubborn and uncompromising first seat had been erased from the past. This also means that a half-immortal without a past can only be a half-immortal forever. His Tao path was destroyed. Immortals' words were law. If they said they would destroy your past, they would definitely destroy it. Even if it was just a piece of the past, it was still indispensable for a cultivator to ascend to immortality. It meant that there would be a loophole in the past, present, and future. Heroes often end up like this. People might be moved for a moment, but they wouldn't be moved for a lifetime. The enforcers were exiled, leaving only the exterior half-immortals to await their punishment. Some people began to regret their impulsiveness just now. Now, the targets of punishment were not just the 200 people, but tens of thousands of people. Every exterior half-immortal was included. In an unknown place beyond the heavens, an old Taoist was lying on his side and taking a nap amidst the netherworld celestial phenomenon. With his hand supporting his chin, he was half awake. It was as if he had become one with the celestial phenomenon. Even if he was close, no one could feel a trace of his aura. He had been lying here for many years, and no one knew how many more years he would lie here. Every breath he took had become a part of the celestial phenomenon. Just as he was feeling contented, a loud voice sounded. Ghost Constellation Lord, neglecting his duties and not being strict enough, idling all day long and absent-minded, causing the resentment in the interior and exterior heavens to soar to the heavens, directly to the celestial court. This person is hereby ordered to be stripped of his position as an exterior immortal monarch. He is to return to his home and await punishment. The old Taoist stretched lazily, clasped his hands to the heavens, and then disappeared. The next moment, Ghost Constellation Lord returned to his immortal palace in the Four Saints' Heavens. Everything was as usual. He was a person who did not raise powerful pets, so he did not have any children, spiritual beasts, or immortal birds. He was all alone and belonged to the category of people who kept a low profile in the Four Saints' Heavens. However, although he kept a low profile, his position was not. An exterior heavenly immortal monarch had some weight in the Four Saints' Heavens, and his position was higher than those immortal monarchs who were in charge of the four symbols heavens of the universe. This was because other immortals were in charge of the universe, while he was in charge of people. Even the immortal court paid great attention to the cultivation of future talents. As the cultivation base of half-immortals in the Four Saints' Heavens of the universe, the exterior heavens had a certain status. He was able to sit in this position because he had a strong backing, but he had messed it up. Not long after he returned to the immortal palace, a divine will descended from the sky. It was his good friend who had some connections with him. Ghost Constellation, I heard you messed up the exterior heavens. As a human immortal, you shouldn't have done that. Tell me, what are you up to this time? Why did you take the initiative to leave this position? Ghost Constellation Lord laughed. I knew I couldn't hide it from you. Apothecary, you don't know how difficult it is to deal with those immortals in the lower realm. Each of them is a troublemaker. After thinking about it, rather than being stuck in the exterior heavens, I might as well take the initiative to leave this position and find a reason to make a mistake. Naturally, the divine will was faint. You don't mean what you say. Forget it. I can't be bothered to care about you. It's good that you're back. At this critical moment, it's better to stay in the Four Saints' Heavens. Ghost Constellation agreed. Exactly. The great changes in the universe and the change of eras are the changes of dynasties in the mortal world. No matter how much credit you have, the most important thing is that you have to be present when the cake is divided. The consequences of having noble character and unquestionable integrity are usually not good. Moreover, we don't know which direction this change will take. Jiao Su and Do Su wanted to leave as well, but they were not as fast as me. The two old friends chatted for a while before leaving. Ghost Constellation Lord calmed himself down and meditated in silence. Did he give himself away in this operation? Neither he nor the apothecary mentioned the key person in this incident. However, it was precisely because they did not mention it that the two immortals were even more cautious. Was the Four Saints' Heavens a place to talk nonsense? One had to think carefully even if they wanted to. Their idle chatter was just a cover-up. What they talked about was fake, and what they did not talk about was the real thing. The layout had begun. In the Four Saints' Heavens, whether it was a human immortal or a genuine immortal, which one of them did not have a layout? Which one was truly resigned to adversity? It was just a different direction and a different point of leverage. Their group seemed to be led by the apothecary, but he also knew that there was a higher level of control above the apothecary. It was not something a human immortal like him could understand. The collapse of the 36 innate great Taos meant that the 36 golden immortals had to leave with the Tao. Therefore, before they left, they had to make countless arrangements just to wait for the day they returned. However, the problem was that they had already given up their position. Who would be willing to welcome them back? Wouldn't it be better to take their own position? It was a complicated situation. Chapter 1947. The cultivators of the interior heaven were scattered and sent down the exterior heaven randomly, but they did not pass through the passage between the interior and exterior heaven. This was their punishment. Most of them were thrown into unfamiliar airspace, but this was not a problem for them, because no matter where they were, they could find the interior heaven. It was the same for Smoky End. Once she entered the interior heaven, she immediately contacted all her acquaintances to check who had returned to the interior heaven. Not only her, but also Qing Xian, Shiyu, Bei Feng, and other friends of Lu Xiaoyi. They were not looking for Lu Xiaoyi's whereabouts, but for the marching monk. Once the killing intent arose, it could not be stopped. But several days had passed, and not only the marching monk, but also the freakish core figures of the Buddhist sect, including Mayani, had not returned. A few of them gathered together, and Qing Xian, as the most senior among them, advised, "Junior sister, don't wait any longer. If they don't return for several days, it means that they will not return to the interior heaven and will return to the bounded domain through other means. They have a guilty conscience and also do not want to start a vendetta in the interior heaven at this moment. I estimate that we will not see them for at least 100 years, and there is no need to feel regret. This is a game that will eventually meet, and no one can avoid it. What has been done must be repaid." As for Little, Smoky Ann shook her head and smiled bitterly. "I'm least worried about him. We were all present at that time, and know that the exterior celestial monarch was not killed, but he must have done something to Little E. For a scourge like him, the most correct thing to do is to kill him on the spot. Giving him a chance to live is helping him grow, so I will not be surprised if he becomes a young god or a second Severance when he returns. I just hate those monks. They don't know what's important and don't care about the big picture. Senior brother Qing Xian, I still don't think we can let go so easily. How to catch them is another matter. But before that, we must expose their ugly faces of internal strife. Since we can't kill them for now, we will first destroy their reputation." Shiyu smiled and said, "Junior sister, don't worry. Senior brother Qing Xian is already making arrangements. We cannot say it directly, and it will be more convincing through a third party to confirm the Buddhist sect's conspiracy, including the incident with Duan Li and the others. The truth is the truth, but we still have to spread the truth as a conspiracy, because in history, framing and framing would always last longer than the truth. Don't worry, the three pure ones are experts in this field. They've been promoting this for millions of years." Qing Xian glared at him. "Junior martial brother Shiyu, what are you saying? So you unparalleled supremes are all innocent people? That old bastard Chongjin hasn't done much in the past few thousand years." Shiyu retorted. "A lot of it was that old bastard Qin Yangzi who came up with the plans, right? Do you know what the other realms called him after the battle at Hung River? He said that he shouldn't be called Qin Yangzi, but filthy intestines." Qing Xian was not at a disadvantage in terms of words. "I see. I also heard that after the battle at Tuguan, those foreign species changed the name of Chongjin to Short Tongue to commemorate his untrustworthiness. Your short tongue is mixed with your filthy intestines." Yin Sun was speechless and started fighting again. He didn't dare to persuade him because the leader of Xianyuan also had an extremely unpleasant name. It was passed down through history, the monk who stirred shit. Why was it a staff instead of a staff? Because the structure of the top of the staff made it easier to stir shit. It was like an egg beater. Finally, the fight ended. Because they were already familiar with the rhythm, both sides could scold each other without blushing. Yin Sun coughed lightly. Little E, I know that no matter what, he won't be back for hundreds of years. He can't stay idle. He's been cooped up in the dome for hundreds of years. Won't he take this opportunity to go out and enjoy himself? And he won't be back. In a few days, I'll make some arrangements and return to the fifth ring. Do you have any words for me? I'm really relieved to leave the interior sky to you two senior martial brothers. In fact, you two are not much worse than your elders. Senior martial brother Qing, Xin's intestines are not filthy, but they're bad. I don't know the length of senior martial brother Shiyu's tongue, but it's barbed. Both of them said in unison, Junior martial sister, how can you say that? They were indeed very angry, but they were also very relaxed. According to their experience, half-immortal Lu had thrived in this kind of beating all his life. There were many people who beat him, but none of them had a good ending. Take the military monks group, for example. Although they could not compete with Lu Xiaoyi's group in the interior sky, they were still a significant force. But now, after the heart plate incident, most of the neutral interior half-immortals stood on the side of Lu Xiaoyi's group, including a few righteous Buddhist disciples. It was not only the interior sky. In the hearts of the people of the exterior sky, the military monk, as the best opponent, had also successfully helped Lu Xiaoyi win the respect of the cultivators of the exterior sky. This seemingly impossible gathering of power was completed in such an inexplicable manner. Fortune and misfortune were interdependent. There was really no fixed number. No one was a fool. The vision of a half-immortal allowed them to see the ins and outs of the incident very clearly. First, there was Duan Li's personal experience, and then there was the shocking change in the Jade Book at the end. The role of Buddhism in this was self-evident. This was also the reason why the military monk, hands-free, and the others were unwilling to come back. Once the general trend was lost, it would be difficult to get back the people's hearts again. The higher one's cultivation, the more one was unwilling to be controlled by others. But if there must be such a person, of course, they must choose a person who was responsible, trustworthy, strong, and not fussy about personal grievances. In this regard, Lu Xiaoyi was completely superior to the military monk. The mission of the heavenly eyes was successfully completed. The people of the exterior sky held Chief Lu in high esteem, except for one person's whereabouts. This was actually the least important to Lu Xiaoyi, because in the eyes of his companions of the fifth ring, his whereabouts were basically unknown. When the weather was hot, maggots multiplied and mosquitoes and flies wreaked havoc. It was the time for a troublemaker to appear. In the past 2,000 years, there had never been an exception. A figure swayed out from the exterior sky. The old Taoist who heard this smiled and tapped his fingers. Well, the fifth ring was controlled, and the eastern sky seemed to follow his lead. The interior sky was controlled. The exterior sky basically couldn't escape. Yes, there were also women. As the chief of the women's friends, this guy was really wild. Every time he started from unexpected places, the effect was great. How many places were there? How many forces were there? When this little guy started to stir up the wind and rain. When Ji couldn't help but feel a little excited. This was much more interesting than Li Wuya's time. Of course, the more people there were, the better. A person's greatness was suitable to be written in a biography, but it was destined to be a tragedy because it was a one-man show. Only the greatness of an era would make everyone have the impulse to participate in it. Li Wuya was good at everything, but he was a bit of a hipster. He stirred shit just to pretend. Lu Xiaoyi was not as good as him. He really treated stirring shit as a career. The organization was tight, the division of labor was clear, the goal was firm, and the plan was carried out layer by layer. Chapter 1948. What was this place? The unfamiliar surroundings made him very confused. This was not the void of the universe, but within a certain world. The scenery was ordinary, and the people were ordinary. The scenery was right in front of him. If he took a step forward, he would be integrated into it. But the choice was up to him. He could also retreat. He was very clear that if he kept retreating, he could leave this ordinary world and return to the void of the universe he was familiar with. Then he could go home through the exterior realm. He was somewhat hesitant because some problems were troubling him. He had no past. The self that he had painstakingly built up was completely destroyed by the full power of the exterior realm, immortal monarch. Thus, he became the person he was now, a person without a past. This was his punishment for deliberately erasing the name list. At that time, the Jade Book had said, "Since you like to forget the past, then I will help you." It had said so, and it had done so. Not just a certain part of the past, but all of the past. Was there such a method in this world that could completely erase someone's memory? Of course there was. For example, the Foundation establishment Jean Dan could easily erase a mortal's memory. Of course, it was more difficult to selectively erase it. What was important was the ability to use one's mind. The Yuaning Lord could easily erase the memory of the Foundation establishment Jean Dan. Similarly, it didn't seem too difficult for a half-immortal to erase the memory of a Yuanying. Therefore, it wasn't impossible for a senior immortal to completely erase the memory of a demon who hadn't completely become a half-immortal. There was a problem to pay attention to here. Erasing the memory. It wasn't erasing the past. The past could never be erased because it actually existed. You could deny it and forget it, but you couldn't make it cease to exist. It was just that he couldn't recall it, and it was sealed in the depths of his memory. The difference was that the sealing method was different. Some were very difficult to unseal, and the cultivator would never be able to find his past in his lifetime. Some could be done, but it also depended on one's luck and hard work. But no matter what, this process was necessary. In this universe, where every second mattered, it was an extra burden for Lu Xiaoyi. But the fact was, there was no use regretting it. Since he wanted to succeed in the exterior realm, this was a risk he had to take. He had a vague feeling about the situation in front of him. Was it a place he had heard of before? But he wasn't sure. It seemed to have something to do with his lost past. But that didn't seem to be the case. It was always hard to guess the thoughts of immortals. However, there was one thing that he was very clear about. The punishment from the exterior immortal monarch seemed to be more of a test than a malicious intent. His intuition was that everything would be explained once he stepped into this ordinary world. He might succeed, but he might also fail on the verge of success. If he gave up and returned to the familiar environment of the universe, then he would still be himself, still the all-powerful Lu Xing of the universe. He could still find his past through some method, which was the safest way. He sighed. He couldn't choose safety now, because his time was running out. Two paths, one unknown, the other familiar. It was a classic multiple-choice question, a classic gain and loss. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. With the unknown, there would be expectations and changes. He would not go back to being the sect leader obediently. He stepped forward and walked into the ordinary world that seemed to be shrouded in fog. The ordinary world didn't seem ordinary. He was the one who was beginning to become ordinary. His abilities were deteriorating rapidly. He fell from half-immortal to monarch and continued to fall. When he was still hesitating about which path to take, his realm had already fallen to Jean Dan and continued to fall. Not every path could be taken. Many paths seemed feasible, but he couldn't take them. There was only one path that seemed to be barely passable. He realized that he had become a teenager, leaning against the window and studying hard. Looking out of the window, it was so familiar and intimate. Familiar scenes, familiar people. The servants hurried past. The maidservants carried food boxes into the courtyard, and the butler followed behind calmly and steadily. His gaze inadvertently swept over the maidservant's buttocks. He didn't really become a teenager. It was as if he was a soul floating 3 feet above the teenager's head. He could feel that as long as he truly merged with his body, he could find his past. But he couldn't enter. This was Lu Province. The time period was before his time travel. He was a real young master of Lu Province, not a fake like him. He more or less understood the meaning of coming to this place. This was deliberately done by an exterior immortal monarch. In other words, this was a very special immortal art. Immortal art that could erase a cultivator's memories. It wasn't a barbaric erasure. No matter how barbaric it was, it couldn't erase time. It couldn't erase those things that truly existed. The special thing about this immortal art was that while erasing your past memories, it also created a scene for you to find them again. It was very in line with the true essence of the immortal art. It achieved a perfect balance between taking and giving. If you found your past in this process, then congratulations, you'd successfully established your past self, which was the most difficult of the past, present, and future. If you couldn't find your past in the end, you couldn't merge with your soul of countless lifetimes, then congratulations, you'd forever lose your past and become a half immortal with no past and no future. It sounded very troublesome, but in fact, it was the method that didn't involve karma, because you'd lose your past because of yourself. There was a certain logic behind taking off your pants and farting. This involved a very profound question of cultivation philosophy. Were the current you and the past you the same? Philosophy was always very brain-burning. Liu Xiaoyi couldn't figure it out for a while, but he was very clear about one thing. At the very least, the current him wasn't the real young master of Lu province, because his consciousness could only float 3 feet above his former self. He couldn't get any closer. The current him wasn't him yet. This was what he needed to work hard for next, to strive to become the past him. This was a bit of a mouthful, because even if it was a person's life at different stages, they were actually different versions of themselves. Infant, teenager, youth, adult, middle-aged, old. But there must be something in common among them. And it was this common thing that supported him through reincarnation after reincarnation. He had a deeper and more fundamental understanding of samsara, although this kind of understanding was useless to him now. Then, what do the current me and the past me have in common? He could only search and find, slowly through the long river of time, through observing every little thing in his life, to find a trace of something hidden in the deepest part of his soul. He couldn't be anxious because there was no use in being anxious because he was now a weak spiritual body that didn't have the strength to trust a chicken. He stopped above his former self's head and couldn't float away alone, nor could he get any closer. God is watching from above, so it was referring to himself. Liu Xiaoyi understood. Chapter 1949. Liu Xiaoyi had a lot of experience in wandering. He had been wandering since he was just a wisp of energy in the universe. Later, he continued to wander after he transmigrated into a human being. Now that he had become his own god, he was still wandering. But this time, he had no choice but to wander. It was passive. He could not go wherever he wanted to go. It was like an emperor's hat, invisibly worn on his former self's head. It allowed him to study, play, eat, sleep, and argue with his mother. Just like now, he was enjoying his supper. This was the inevitable arrangement of a rich family for the children who studied hard. Young people always got hungry faster. Ping'an stood beside him with a serious face, watching him eat. His posture and expression were serious. His eyes swept over the servant girls' swaying buttocks again. Of course, his body did not notice these, but as his own god, he saw them clearly. Why didn't he notice this indecent thing before? He was a wretched, greasy, middle-aged man of his age who had disguised himself very successfully. Having a wife and children and looking at other women's buttocks were two different things. Buttocks were always better than other people's. After the servant girl went out, he leaned over to Liu Xiaoyi's ear sneakily. "Young master, eat quickly. There's a good opportunity today." Obviously, this body understood what he meant. He finished the chicken soup in a few mouthfuls and stood up while wiping his mouth. The two of them sneaked out of the small courtyard one after the other. It was very abnormal because they were sneaking around the wall. Liu Xiaoyi, as the god of this body, had to move forward with them and maintain a first-person perspective. He was surprised. Ever since he transmigrated into this body at the age of 18, He did not feel that he had such a close relationship with this butler. The two of them left his small courtyard and walked along the wall. As the butler, he was very familiar with the routes in the mansion, the guards, the night watchmen, and the rest of the servants. He knew where people were and when people were. So, he perfectly avoided the eyes and ears of all the servants along the way. God Lu was getting more and more confused. Could it be that before he transmigrated, this body had already begun to cultivate without anyone knowing? But after he ascended the ghost realm, everything was washed away? That shouldn't be the case. Why didn't Ping and say anything? The two of them took many twists and turns. In fact, they didn't leave the manor. They only came to a low-tiled house. It was obvious that this was the place where the servants stayed and rested. There was a lantern at the front of the room, but it was dark at the back, and there was a fence. Ping was very familiar with the place. He touched a spot on the seemingly sturdy fence and pushed it open. He leaned sideways and squeezed in while whispering, "Be gentle. Don't be like last time, where I had to pretend to be a dog and bark to fool them. Now that there's no dog in the residence, what else can I pretend to be?" The body curled its lips. "Aren't there still cats? If it doesn't work, there's still the weasel." Although he said that, he was still very careful. Obviously, he didn't want to be discovered by others. There were sundries in the fence, such as shabby tables, chairs, ladders, and all kinds of living utensils. If they were careless, they would make a noise. It was very challenging for two ordinary people. However, the two of them were obviously very experienced. They didn't make any noise all the way. It was obvious that they were used to it. God Lu was even more confused. Obviously, they were not going to cultivate. It was more like they were going to explore a secret. The question was, how could they explore a secret so skillfully? Soon, they bypassed the messy pile of sundries. Ping and began to show off his achievements. "Young master," they reported that they needed some curtains. I deliberately made it difficult for them. I didn't give them good ones. I gave them some curtains with a few holes so that they could see more clearly. The body didn't say anything. Instead, he patted Ping and shoulder to show his encouragement. Ping enjoyed the pat very much and lowered his voice. After supper, there's nothing to do. Now the weather is cool, so they don't take a bath often. I know that young master is impatient. In the afternoon, I deliberately arranged them to clean some rooms that haven't been used for a long time. Those who are born smelly and sweaty will definitely take a bath at night. Now Lu Shuming completely understood. It turned out that the problem of watching his senior sister taking a bath was not brought by the thoughts of his previous world. That's right. In the era of incomparably developed information, what couldn't they see? Why did it take so much effort? Finally, they came to the back window of the bathroom. The gauze curtain was tattered. It was really difficult for Ping to find such a tattered thing. It was estimated that this guy tore it secretly by himself. The body leaned against the window and watched enthusiastically. Ping was on tenterhooks. God Lu's position was more than 3 feet higher than the body's eyes. It happened that there were no holes, so he couldn't see anything. Of course, he was not interested in this. After getting used to seeing round and smooth immortal farts, who would be interested in looking at mortal farts full of fat? It was just a small episode, but many interesting things could be seen from it. For example, in Lu Province, because there was no male master like his father, the young master's education in certain aspects was very lacking. If it was in a normal big house, the children of a big family would have been brought to the brothel by their elders to drink and have fun after reaching adulthood. Under the influence of actual combat, how could they have such a bad habit? After half an hour, the two of them returned to the same way they came. It was not until they entered their own courtyard that Ping heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, there was no mistake. If the old madam knew about this, nothing would happen to the young master, but he would be doomed. He was destined to be kicked out of the house. In Pooh City, who would dare to use him? Young master, listen to my advice. There are countless brothel houses in Pooh City. Which young master hasn't played there before? Who would laugh at you? Even if you don't want people to know, there are many hidden places that take care of the guest's privacy. There's no problem. The money is enough. The income you've earned during the holidays and the daily income over the years adds up to a lot. Young master, you don't have any other places to spend money. Even if you don't do it, why don't you find dance or siesta dance? Raiment dance, thin gown dance, primitive dance. Why do you have to do these in the house? It makes people nervous. I'm afraid that something will happen and it will be seen by others and reported to the two madams. The body was very disdainful and even tugged at his school bag. There are things to do and things not to do. Ping, and shook his head when he heard this. There are things to do and things not to do. The things you do are not as good as the things you don't do. It couldn't be helped. Who asked the young master to have such a strange temper? How was a treacherous official cultivated? That was how it was cultivated. Chapter 1950. P.S. Looking for guaranteed monthly votes. The first thing Lu Deity did when he came to this ordinary world was to give him a huge shock. This made him immediately realize that there was a fatal flaw in his past self-establishment. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't be the young master of Lu Province. It was because he didn't have a comprehensive understanding of his past. He thought that he was the young master of Lu Province, but this wasn't true, or rather, it wasn't completely true. Zhongsan could say that he was Zhongsan, and Li Si could say that he was Li Si, but Lu Xiaoyi couldn't say that because he had indeed changed. He could be made up of three people's consciousness, or two. The young master of Lu Province, his soul in his previous life, could have an unclear relationship with the crow ancestor, or could the last two be the same thing? He hadn't awakened the memories of his previous life. This could only mean two things. Either he was the young master of Lu Province, and he had never cultivated in his previous life, or he had never cultivated to the level of Yuanying, or he hadn't reached that level yet. He was now a half-immortal, and if he hadn't reached that level yet, then no one other than the crow ancestor could meet this condition. This was the reason why he wanted to purify himself. However, this process didn't go smoothly. Before this, he thought that he had already established his past self, but now it seemed that there were flaws hidden so deeply that even he didn't realize it. It wasn't until his past was erased by the immortal that he had the chance to truly face his past, a real young master of Lu Province. At the very least, he understood one thing. On him, there seemed to be more of the shadow of the young master of the Lu family. It was in the details that he rarely paid attention to. For example, where did the habit of peeping at people bathing come from? He was the young master of Lu Province. This was a very ridiculous process, and he wanted to desperately prove that he was himself. What happened next made him feel even more incredulous. This body had read books for a day and experienced such stimulation at night. After the excitement, he was tired and quickly fell into a deep sleep. Then, Lu Deity felt that his spiritual energy state had fallen into a sluggish state in a very short time, as if it had been frozen. He couldn't even think. He was a little surprised. Was he going to be sent back just like that? Wasn't it too short? He hadn't done anything yet, and nothing had changed. Soon, he couldn't even support this last bit of complaining. As his body fell into a deep sleep, his spiritual soul also fell into a deep sleep. His last thought was that the spiritual energy supply of this adventure was closely related to the main body. Things didn't reach the worst point. When the body woke up the next morning, God Lu also woke up. What followed was a series of daily routines. However, in this series of daily routines, he discovered an extremely shocking abnormality. Because this body was greeting his mother, he suddenly realized that today was not the second day, but the day before yesterday. In other words, the long river of time here wasn't flowing with the current, but flowing against the current. Every time he fell into a deep sleep with this body, when he woke up the next day, he didn't grow up by one day, but became younger by one day. What was the mechanism of such a celestial art? Even though he was a half-immortal, he had no clue. Since he was already here, he couldn't go back now. He could only feel his past self in this kind of time reversal. which he wasn't completely familiar with now. He found the commonalities and commonalities. When he found more and more of these things, he was getting closer and closer to completely integrating with this body. The external manifestation was that he had changed from 3 feet above his head to 2.5 feet above his head. He was half a foot closer to the main body. Finally, he saw hope. He just needed to hold on. But in this life, he really couldn't hold on anymore, because he was getting younger and younger, from a young man to a young boy, then to a child, and now to a baby. The time he slept was getting longer and longer, so long that Lu Deity could only stay awake for 6 to 6 hours a day. His spiritual energy form sank to 2.5 feet before it stopped sinking, because it was impossible to find common ground with a baby. Was it a bed of pee? This kind of change was very novel. He had an intuition about what he would encounter next. Then he would just sleep and wait in his sleep. Time? He was too lazy to calculate it, because it was meaningless. Was this an instantaneous celestial art? Or was it synchronized with the outside world? It seemed impossible to synchronize, because the time outside was flowing with the current, but here he was flowing against the current, and it wasn't completely flowing against the current. It was flowing with the current during the day, and suddenly taking a big step back at night. It was as if he was doing a reverse Yanko dance. At the moment when he jumped back to the mother's womb, he felt that he had regained consciousness. Only in the mother's womb did he, the 3-foot god, begin to gradually integrate with his body, and the degree of integration was inversely proportional to the growth of the fetus. When his body became the embryo at the beginning of conception, the degree of integration reached perfection. But this kind of integration had no practical significance. Now, he was just a big cell, and even his hands and feet hadn't grown out. In this kind of situation, he still had things to explore, such as the mystery in the womb. The mystery in the womb was the biggest secret in the process of human formation. It was a mystery in the mystery of reincarnation, karma, creation, fate, good fortune, yin and yang, impermanence, and other innate great Taos. Since the history of cultivation, no one had ever been able to explain this mystery clearly. Where did the first consciousness come from? In which aspect was the influence of the past reflected? Could it determine a person's personality when they were in the womb? Everything in this body, was it given more by reincarnation, or was it given more by the parents? There were too many mysteries, but unfortunately, he didn't exist as an embryo for long. There was only one thing he was sure of, and that was the most selfless support given to him by the mother in this process. If he didn't experience all of this, he would never fully understand this point. Nutrition was always given to him first. The mother was in front of the virus that harmed him, because he was a child, and she was the mother. Continue to retreat, backtrack in the darkness. Then, suddenly, light came, as if all the shackles had been removed. He saw the sky again, and saw the world again. A strange world, a strange crowd of crying people, men and women, the old and the young. The mourning hall outside had already been set up, and there was also a heavy coffin made of enamel wood. Yes, this was right. Today was the last day of his reincarnation, but tomorrow was the second to last day before his death. It was a mouthful, but he had already adapted to this kind of time reversal. The consciousness of a dying person was also vague. His consciousness was sometimes clear and sometimes drowsy. Therefore, even a god like him was drowsy, and it was very difficult to get an accurate integration of information. Until the second day. Chapter 1951. P.S. Looking for guaranteed monthly votes. On the second day, which was the day he was further away from death, the cries were not as deafening as before. It was just sobbing. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that his body was in a bad state. There was no way to save him. The coffin was still there, but the mourning hall was still being decorated. It was summer now, so there was no freezer. On the third day, no one was crying, but a few of his children were arguing nervously beside him. They were arguing about how to divide the house, how to divide the land, how to divide the gold and silver, and so on. They were like a swarm of flies buzzing around. On the 10th day, he was still lying on the bed. Beside him were his most trusted aides. He was secretly making arrangements for matters after his death. The illegitimate children outside the city were having a hard time, so they had to be compensated. Which son was not filial enough, so they had to be given less of the family property, and so on. For a month, the newly married and most favored concubine was touching him. He wanted to, but he was powerless. A year later. He was still a bridegroom, just a little older. But in this world, as long as you had power and influence, it was nothing new for the old and young to be matched. It could also be used as a way to ward off bad luck. 10 years later, he was invited to a gathering with his old friends. Signed endlessly 30 years later, he was in the prime of his life, high-spirited, and his family had just been established. 50 years, 70 years. He began to walk the same path again. The 2.5 feet of deity was now 2 feet and 2 inches, but it was no longer decreasing because he had entered the stage of being a child again. This was the beginning of another reincarnation. This kind of life was enough for him to carefully experience. Compared with himself, he found similarities. Even if he found fewer and fewer things after reincarnation, at least he had a direction. The mystery of the fetus was the most important thing to him. He had an intuition that if he wanted to completely integrate into it, he had to solve it at this stage. As for reducing the 3 feet of deity to 0 feet, it was almost impossible. Just the experience of 2 reincarnations made him understand that this was just a math game. The further he went, the closer he could only be to 0 distance. But it was impossible for him to really reach it. 0 distance meant that it would perfectly overlap with Lu Xiaoyi's original body. Even if he was not a transmigrator, he might not be able to do this. He was completely isolated from the cultivation world of the universe. He couldn't even try to ask or do anything. He was like a strange circle that floated above the head of the young master reincarnated from Lu province. When they slept, he would also sleep with them. When they made babies, he would grumble in boredom. He couldn't leave. He couldn't even commit suicide. No one could see him, not even cultivators. His entire life was bound to this body. Ren Liuyan retreated and saw the youth that came rushing at him. The only good news was that he finally realized that the passage of time here had nothing to do with the environment of the universe outside. In other words, if he could escape one day, perhaps not much time had passed in the outside world. I hope it won't take too long. Lu Xiaoyi went back one life after another. In each life, he discovered his commonality. In each life, he explored the secrets of reincarnation. This went on for life after life. After all, he was a half-immortal soul. After dozens of reincarnations, he finally compressed the 3-foot god to a foot. However, it was difficult for him to compress even an inch. This was a simple mathematical problem. The answer was infinitely close, but it would always be close. His real progress was not in this, but in the mystery of the fetus. After dozens of reincarnations, he had a substantial understanding of the secrets of reincarnation. It could be said that he no longer needed reincarnation fragments on the path of reincarnation. His progress on the path of reincarnation gave him the possibility of completely merging with the fetus in the womb. Furthermore, he would not slowly separate from the fetus as it grew. He was very careful with this method, because one careless mistake could turn him into an idiot. The key was the moment when the fetus disappeared. If the operation was successful, he would appear in the body of his previous life and not float above his head like a halo. However, he had always been hesitant about whether he should do this. This was because a natural fusion was different from a fusion using a cultivation method. The former was following the will of heaven, while the latter was changing one's life. A passive fusion was called transmigration, while an active fusion was called seizing. The difference was very subtle. Even if he was seizing himself, could he do it or not? If he really merged, seized, and placed his consciousness above the consciousness of the main body, what would happen? It seemed that there would be no change. This was because he was driving backward in time. After seizing once, he would have to seize a second time. If he seized today, it might affect tomorrow, but it would not affect yesterday. He would seize as many times as he lived. What he did was meaningless to his own life, because it was equivalent to not doing anything. When he woke up after sleeping, he would still be yesterday without the fusion. In theory, this kind of fusion would last for a lifetime. When he finally returned to the womb, the two would become one. This was only in theory, and it was his deduction. Lu Xiaoyi continued to deduce, trying to be more confident in the technical level. This was because he might only have this one chance, and there was no room for error. After going through more than 10 reincarnations, he had finally achieved perfection in terms of technique. Ever since he started cultivating, the application of the mind had always been his strength. This was also the reason why he was still so confident even after dawdling here for so long. He had a plan, and he had the means. What he lacked now was determination. He was not an indecisive person, but now he was doubting whether his method of fusion, which he had a high chance of succeeding in, was ethically valid. There were many paradoxes. Could the reincarnated people be replaced in different reincarnations? Were the souls of the reincarnated people completely the same? If the answer was yes, what positive significance would a reincarnated person have to the universe and the progress of mankind? Forever stuck in one's ways, forever not thinking of making progress. Ling Long had once told him that in the universe, nothing was eternal. If he had to choose one, it would be that only change was eternal. Thinking about it carefully, the meaning was endless. If the answer was no, it meant that the 1-foot-long deity that he was now would never be able to land on the head of this body. This was because they could not replace each other, because in every life there would be more or less parental factors that would affect it. Then what was the point of such a test? The most important core was whether he should seize the body or not, whether he could pass this test or not. This was a question of morality. It was very illusory and philosophical, but at his level, once he made the wrong choice, he would be ruined for life. This was a reason why he was hesitating. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.